In the quiet town of Moose Lake, the disappearance of 19-year-old student Katie Pua remains one of the most perplexing cases in recent memory. Her case was so extraordinary that even experts from NASA became involved in the search efforts, yet despite their advanced techniques, she was never found alive. This unsettling event left a deep mark on the community, especially on the peaceful town where she lived. Katie Elizabeth Pua was born on February 28, 1980, in the small town of Duth, located in St. Louis County, Minnesota. As the second child in a close-knit family, she shared a strong bond with her older brother. When she started school, her family moved to Carleton County, settling in Barnum. Known for her outgoing nature, energetic spirit, and creative talents, Katie was passionate about music. She played guitar, studied vocals, and performed in a band, delighting audiences with her performances. Her love for animals was equally evident, as she volunteered at local shelters and actively participated in maintaining community parks. During high school, her natural beauty and charisma earned her second place in a city beauty contest. After graduating, she pursued higher education, moving to Moose Lake, a serene town in the same county, to attend college. By then, she was in a relationship with Mark, her boyfriend of several years, and they planned to marry. They rented a modest apartment in a safe neighborhood, with Katie studying criminal law at university, while Mark focused on computer technology. To support themselves and save for their wedding, both worked part-time jobs. Katie at a gas station near a busy highway, often working night shifts, which she enjoyed for its flexible schedule. Her parents, however, worried about her safety during her late-night shifts at the gas station, situated along a highway bustling with traffic from nearby cities. They felt reassured by the station's surveillance cameras and the presence of a popular diner nearby that remained crowded most hours. Despite their concerns, Katie insisted she was safe, confident in the security measures around her. On May 26, 1999, Katie reported for her usual shift. She swapped shifts with a colleague and took her place behind the cash register around midnight. That night seemed routine until a woman arrived at the station, filled her tank, and entered the store to pay and purchase items. Little did anyone know this seemingly ordinary day would turn into a baffling mystery that would leave the community searching for answers for years to come. After gathering her belongings, she approached the cash register but found it unattended. Confused, she waited for a moment before heading to the utility room and calling out, yet received no response. This felt strange, especially since the store was fully operational, lights were on, and the doors were unlocked. When no clerk appeared after about 10 minutes, she decided to contact the police. The officers arrived promptly and thoroughly examined the store and its surroundings. They found nothing unusual, no signs of a struggle, no traces of disturbance, and everything was in its proper place, including a substantial amount of cash in the register. Robbery was immediately ruled out. Initially, it was thought that Katie might have left voluntarily due to an urgent matter. However, her personal belongings, including her keys to her house and car, remained in the store. Her vehicle was parked outside, which raised questions. How could she have left on foot, abandoning her car and purse? Such an action seemed unlikely, hinting at a more concerning scenario. The police contacted Katie's parents to report her disappearance and see if they had any clues or reasons why she might have left suddenly. Mr. and Mrs. Pua assured authorities that Katie was responsible and would not neglect her duties, as she valued her job highly. Her fiancé echoed their sentiments, expressing his confusion over her abrupt absence. At this point, Katie Pua was officially listed as missing, and the store was treated as a potential crime scene. The investigation began with a review of footage from 4 strategically placed surveillance cameras inside the store. The initial hours of her shift, up to around 11 o'clock in the evening, revealed no suspicious activity or unusual behavior. Nothing appeared out of the ordinary during those early hours, leaving investigators to consider what might have happened after that time. A young woman entered a local store and engaged in a brief conversation with Katie for about 10 minutes, during which she made no purchase. Their exchange made it evident that she was either an acquaintance or friend of the missing student. Approximately 30 minutes later, a man entered the same store, glanced around briefly, and left just as quickly. Soon after, he returned, and during this time, Katie had gone to the back room. It appeared he might have been observing her from outside through the glass door. When he re-entered the store, he headed straight for the back area, but since there were no surveillance cameras in that section, what transpired next remains uncertain. A few minutes later, Katie and the unknown man emerged from the back room together, moving toward the exit. The man was walking behind her, gripping her by the hair with one hand and pressing his other hand against her back. It was clear he was threatening her with a weapon, likely a knife or firearm, and forcing her to leave with him. This act constituted an abduction from her workplace. However, further investigation faced obstacles because there were no cameras at the nearby gas station or in its parking lot, making it impossible to determine where the suspect took Katie, what vehicle he used, or his direction of travel. Given the store and gas station's isolated location along a busy highway, it's probable that if he had led her away on foot, someone would have seen and contacted authorities. Most likely, he took her to the parking lot and placed her in his vehicle. Complicating matters, the available footage was of poor quality, grainy black and white images typical of the year 1999, making facial recognition difficult and delaying efforts to produce a detailed suspect profile. Law enforcement and volunteers searched several miles around the area, hoping to find clues but found nothing conclusive. Investigators also interviewed Melinda, the only witness who had spoken with Katie shortly before her disappearance. Melinda, a close friend and fellow student working part-time at a nearby diner, recalled seeing a suspicious man bothering both a customer inside the diner and another woman in the parking lot earlier that evening. He had suggested they should get better acquainted, but both women declined and moved away separately. Melinda's shift ended at 11 o'clock that night. As Melinda secured the door and prepared to leave, a man suddenly appeared again, approaching her with questions about whether the restaurant was closing and what time it would reopen the next morning. Finding his inquiry unusual, she quickly decided to inform Katie about the visitor, suggesting they might need to involve the authorities. However, Katie reassured her that everything was under control, noting that the establishment was well covered by security cameras. Melinda then recalled that the man had driven a black Ford F-150 pickup truck. They both left the parking lot around the same time, but he quickly overtook her vehicle. She remembered part of his license plate, numbers 5 to 57 and the letter Y, which became a crucial clue. During the late 90s, without a national electronic database, locating a vehicle based on such partial information was time-consuming. Both Melinda and another witness at a nearby gas station provided rough descriptions of the suspect as darkness hindered their ability to see him clearly. They described him as a white male, approximately 35 to 40 years old, with long blonde hair. He spoke without an accent and wore a baseball cap that partially obscured his face. The available surveillance footage was of limited help due to its low resolution. For the first time, law enforcement enlisted assistance from NASA specialists to enhance the images, employing advanced astronomical imaging technology to clarify the suspect's face. Despite the challenge of strange angles and his avoidance of direct camera gazes, they managed to produce a more detailed composite image. This clearer portrait was distributed across police stations statewide and frequently aired on news broadcasts, urging the public to remain alert and report any sightings matching the description or similar vehicles. Soon, authorities received dozens of tips daily, most of which proved false. After a few days, they detained a 25-year-old man who bore a strong resemblance to the composite sketch. He had a prior record for theft and harassment, but was released after authorities noted a key difference. He had a large tattoo covering his entire arm, which the suspect in the footage lacked. An important detail was that the man who had accompanied Katie out of the store was wearing a Yankees baseball team t-shirt with the number 23. Melinda confirmed that, although the suspect approached her differently, surveillance footage left no doubt it was the same individual. A week later, a call from Minneapolis raised new suspicions. A concerned man reported that the person in the composite resembled his neighbor, a cleaner who drove a similar vehicle. Around the time of the girl's disappearance, this neighbor had unexpectedly cut his long blonde hair and grown a beard. It was soon revealed that the suspect was 50-year-old Donald Hutchinson, who had recently quit his job without explanation. This sudden change in behavior and appearance heightened suspicions about his involvement in the case. Donald Hutchinson, whose real name was Donald Allen Blom, was born in Minnesota in 1949. Growing up in a troubled household, he endured an alcoholic father who subjected both him and his mother to abuse. As a teenager, Donald began drinking heavily and exhibited uncontrollable aggression, causing concern among those around him. This tumultuous behavior led to his transfer at age 25 to a specialized school for difficult children. His criminal record began to accumulate in his mid-20s. After kidnapping and assaulting a 14-year-old girl, he served only 3 years before being released on parole. Shortly thereafter, he was rearrested for assault and harassment, receiving another brief sentence. In 1985, he was arrested once more, this time for kidnapping 2 teenage girls, whom he took to a remote area and restrained. He assaulted one girl and repeatedly strangled the other, reviving her multiple times in a disturbing game of life and death. Fortunately, a passerby walking a dog heard their screams and intervened, saving them. Blom then spent 9 years behind bars. Following his release, he changed his name, moved to a different city, and kept a low profile to avoid detection. He married and fathered 4 children, presenting a seemingly stable family life. Despite this, his addiction to alcohol and substances often led to violent outbursts that affected his wife and children. Occasionally, he sought new victims, though his criminal past remained hidden from those around him. To conceal his identity, he went to great lengths, including altering his appearance by growing long hair and a beard, which he sometimes shaved off. Initially, law enforcement lacked concrete evidence to detain him, as they could only question him during their investigation. They knew he owned approximately 20 acres of land just over half a mile from the store where Katie was abducted. After her disappearance, police had already visited him. Donald claimed he had sold his black pickup truck, asserting that its license plate was different from the one seen by witnesses. He even produced a document as proof, later revealed to be forged. Further investigation led police to obtain a search warrant for his property. In a large barn, they discovered an unexpected find. Donald had tried to hide his black Ford F-150 behind old junk and furniture. The license plate matched the one identified by Melinda, the victim. This discovery began to crack his composed exterior, yet he continued to deny any involvement in Katie's case. Despite this significant lead, the evidence was still insufficient for an arrest, as the license plate was only a partial match and lacked corroborating witnesses or video footage. Following the suspect's apprehension in that particular vehicle, authorities shifted their investigative efforts toward examining the residence, seeking any evidence of the missing girl or even Katie herself. The house was meticulously clean, showing no signs of violence, forced entry, or clues linking it directly to her disappearance. Yet, exploring such a vast property, spanning over 25 acres, posed significant logistical challenges, requiring more than a day and considerable resources. Consequently, the search involved both National Guard personnel and hundreds of volunteers. The initial days yielded no breakthroughs, but by the second day, investigators uncovered unusual ashes suggesting something had been burned over an extended period. Among the remains were bone fragments, which forensic experts carefully collected and sent for analysis. While most bones appeared to be animal remains, parts of a human skeleton, including a tooth, were also found. Specialists identified the bones as belonging to a young woman between 18 and 23 years old. However, DNA testing was complicated because prolonged exposure to high temperatures had damaged much of the genetic material. When investigators from other states joined the case, they managed to extract a DNA fragment matching that of the missing girl. Unfortunately, this evidence was considered only circumstantial and insufficient to definitively prove the suspect's guilt. Given the importance of the evidence, authorities focused on analyzing the tooth found among the ashes. It was revealed that the tooth contained a rare filling made of silicone and zirconium, an advanced dental material. Conversations with Katie's dentist confirmed that he had performed the procedure, recognizing his work since he had used materials obtained from an international dental conference just a week before her disappearance. Although all collected evidence remained circumstantial, the strength of the combined findings was enough for law enforcement to arrest Donald and hold him until the trial. On June 22nd of 1999, the suspect entered a plea of not guilty, retained legal counsel, and expressed willingness to cooperate with investigators. During a detailed search of his belongings, authorities discovered multiple firearms without proper permits. Soon after, Donald began to confess, admitting to kidnapping Katie from a store, bringing her to his property, and strangling her before burning her remains. He denied any coercion or sexual intent, attributing his actions to the influence of alcohol and illegal substances he had consumed. Donald claimed he used only firewood and paper to incinerate the body, though experts argued that such a method alone would be insufficient for complete destruction. That evening, insufficient fuel prompted aimless driving through the neighborhood. When Melinda was spotted at a gas station, Donald initially planned to follow her after she left, but he changed his mind. Instead, he overtook her vehicle and returned home to change clothes before heading back to the store where Katie worked. This explains inconsistencies in eyewitness accounts regarding his attire. 2 weeks later, Donald unexpectedly recanted his confession, insisting on his innocence. He claimed that he had been pressured into confessing through threats against himself and his wife. During the trial, his wife supported this version by providing an alibi, stating he was with her at home that evening and had not left the residence. In a surprising development, 2 former victims from Odna Tisiaca Deviatsot Vosem Desiat Tree came forward, describing their encounters with Donald and portraying him as a ruthless individual who had subjected them to severe abuse and exploitation. The evidence, combined with these testimonies, convinced the jury to unanimously find him guilty, resulting in a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Donald's wife later admitted she had lived in constant fear of her husband, who had habitually assaulted her and their children. She explained that she felt compelled to provide him with an alibi out of concern for her safety. She eventually changed her last name, took their children, and moved to another state to escape his influence. Meanwhile, investigators working on this high-profile case suspected that Blom might be a serial offender involved in multiple unresolved crimes. They linked him to several cases involving the disappearance of young girls under similar circumstances. Specifically, he was believed to be connected to the strangling of Wilma Johnson in Odna Tisiaca Deviatsot Vosem Desia Tree and the Odna Tisiaca Deviatsot Devianosto Tree abduction and murder of student Holly Spangler. In 2021, Blom was transferred to a medium-security prison at Mikiev Farbo, which he described as a vacation due to its more relaxed conditions. However, after protests from Katie's family, he was relocated to a high-security facility in Stillwater, Minnesota. He passed away there on January 10, 2023, at the age of 73. Katie Pua's case has been widely featured in popular crime documentaries. The HLN channel aired an episode titled Tooth or Consequences as part of its series Forensic Files *, focusing on her story. The Discovery Channel produced an episode of New Detectives * called Fatal Abduction, dedicated to her case. Additionally, in 2010, a documentary titled From the Ashes * was created using investigation materials. On March 20th, 2020, in Allura, Portugal, 20-year-old Dogo Goncalves went to meet a girl he admired. Tragically, he was unprepared for how this seemingly romantic encounter would unfold in the picturesque resort town of Allura, renowned as a premier destination in the Algarve region of southern Portugal. Born in Odna Tisiaca Deviatsot Devianosto Deviat, Diogo was the only child in a humble yet hard-working family whose income depended largely on the ebb and flow of tourism. His parents saw him as an exemplary son, responsible, diligent, and trustworthy, while friends described him as outgoing and warm, valuing both family and social connections. He completed high school locally and then pursued a degree in computer science to support his studies and help with household expenses. At 16, in Divi Tisiaci Piatnatsat, he began working at a well-known fast food chain, gaining experience and earning his own income. Tragedy struck when Diogo was just 17. His father suffered a severe stroke, leaving him in a persistent vegetative state, a crisis widely covered by the media, which added to the family's hardships. That same year, another devastating event occurred. His mother, a dedicated cleaner at a shopping mall, was hit by a vehicle while on her way to work. She was dragged several meters into a ditch and succumbed to her injuries. Although the driver fled, authorities quickly identified him and brought him to justice. During this difficult period, Diogo's father was moved to a specialized medical facility for proper care. Concerned for his well-being, his maternal aunt invited him to stay with her, but after weeks of living together, their differences made cohabitation impossible. Seeking stability, Diogo confided in a friend whose parents offered him a place to stay in the Alouette Algarve neighborhood. Living among familiar faces provided some comfort amid the turmoil. Despite his young age, Diogo demonstrated resilience, patience, and optimism in navigating these hardships. By 18, in DVE Tiziaci Semnatsat, he completed his computer technology degree and secured a 6-month internship at Vita Park, a prestigious hotel. His dedication impressed the management, leading to a technician role in 2018. This opportunity marked a new chapter, prompting him to leave his previous job as a duty manager at the fast food restaurant where he had worked for nearly a year. Eager for growth, Diogo looked forward to new prospects. As he settled into his new position, he began to envision a brighter future. He purchased a car and built good relationships with colleagues, including Maria Malva, a 19-year-old security guard at the hotel who caught his attention. Dogo Maria's journey began in modest circumstances marked by early hardships. Her mother grappled with mental health struggles, while her father left the family when she was young, and she never reconnected with him. Driven by a passion for martial arts, Maria trained in karate and dreamed of joining law enforcement. However, her aspirations were dashed when her application was rejected because of a tattoo. This setback led her to pursue training with a private security firm, specializing in various security services. From the outset, Dogo openly admired Maria, but she remained distant and indifferent to his feelings. According to Fabio Asta, a close friend of Dogo's, his infatuation was intense. Dogo's devotion was evident. He declined a lucrative job opportunity at the Sheraton hotel chain in Lisbon simply to stay close to her. During her shifts, he often brought her meals, and over time, they grew nearly inseparable. Many observers assumed they were a couple, despite Maria's clear statements that she did not want romantic involvement, having recently ended a toxic relationship with a naval officer. Still, her mixed signals kept Dogo hopeful, and he continually sought ways to demonstrate his affection through small gestures. One day, Dogo was deeply hurt when he saw a social media video of Maria kissing another woman. He felt betrayed, believing she should have told him she was not interested in men, which he thought explained her rejection. Fabio tried to reassure him that such behavior was common among girls, but Dogo remained unconvinced, insisting that she had misled him and that this was why she rejected his romantic advances. Despite his disappointment, their friendship persisted. Maria continued to accept his gifts and invitations for outings, often citing her roommate's jealous boyfriend as a reason she couldn't have another man in her apartment. In December of the year 2019, Dogo received news that he would finally get compensation for his mother's passing, which had occurred 3 years earlier. The sum of 70,000 euros prompted him to consider purchasing a house so he would no longer have to pay rent. He shared this milestone with Maria, who soon after resigned from her job at the hotel. She explained she could no longer tolerate her co-workers' comments about her supposed relationship with Dogo and wanted to spend more time with her mother, who needed her attention due to her mental health issues. At first, her reasons seemed genuine, but subsequent events suggested that her decision to leave might have been influenced by other factors. Mariana Fona, a 20-year-old nurse, became entangled in a sinister scheme involving her close friend Maria. The two young women living together at Mariana's parents' house due to financial constraints shared a complicated relationship. When Maria learned of a substantial sum of money that Diogo was set to receive, she began to draw closer to him, possibly sharing this information with Mariana. Together, they devised a plan to deceive Diogo and access his bank account details, aiming to steal his funds. One day, after Diogo repeatedly refused Maria's advances, she unexpectedly proposed spending a romantic evening with him, a gesture that thrilled the young man who had long harbored feelings for her. Their rendezvous was scheduled for Friday evening, March 20th, 2020. Diogo, excited and trusting, had no suspicion of the trap awaiting him. According to official reports and media accounts, Mariana offered Diogo a glass of orange juice she had brought, unaware that it contained a hidden ingredient. The drink was laced with 3 milligrams of a central nervous system depressant, a drug Mariana had stolen from her workplace. Her plan was to sedate Diogo, then manipulate his fingers to unlock his phone and access his banking information. While Mariana waited outside in her car, Maria executed their scheme inside. Maria sent multiple messages to Mariana, checking if the drug was taking effect, as its action was slower than expected. As Diogo's condition worsened, he grew increasingly anxious and confused. In an attempt to calm him, Maria promised an erotic dance but insisted on tying him to a table first. After several minutes in restraints, Diogo panicked and begged to be released. His distress escalated and Maria's demeanor turned aggressive as they struggled. Using her martial arts skills, Mariana overpowered Diogo, restraining him with her arms. During the struggle, she reportedly cut off his airflow, leading to his unconsciousness. Mariana then called her friend into the apartment. When she found Diogo on the floor, Mariana questioned Maria about their plan, which had apparently deviated from the original intent of merely stealing his keys and money. Upon discovering that Diogo was unresponsive, Mariana administered resuscitative measures. When he regained consciousness, he was highly agitated and tried to defend himself, possibly recognizing another conspirator. In his defensive reaction, he attempted to attack Mariana. She intervened, grabbing him to prevent further harm, but the details of what followed remain part of the ongoing investigation. Following a series of disturbing events, the actions of both women have been carefully examined as part of ongoing investigations based on available evidence and testimonies from those involved. Tragically, Du's life ended at the hands of the woman he loved, his body found in the living room of Maria and Mariana's house. Immediately after the incident, the women set about executing their plan to cover up the crime. They first severed his thumb and index finger to access his phone, enabling them to unlock a mobile payment app and transfer funds. This process took several days due to daily transaction limits. The crime unfolded just as restrictions on movement, known as 9th of 19, came into effect, coinciding with the rise of remote work. Du was scheduled to go to his job the following day, but the women attempted to prevent his colleagues from noticing his absence. They sent a message from Du's phone to his coworker, claiming he couldn't attend work and needed a replacement. This message aroused suspicion because Du was not known for making such abrupt requests. When asked if everything was all right, his phone responded positively, yet subsequent conversations appeared uncharacteristic. Over the next day and into Saturday, communication between Du and others continued, but the messages grew increasingly unusual. One message to his supervisor stated that Du wouldn't return to work because he had met a woman from France and planned to move in with her. This seemed odd, as Du was known for his dependability, and the supervisor tried to contact him directly but received no response. Another message claimed Du was not in a condition to answer calls. The supervisor expressed a desire to hear directly from him, but that did not happen. These suspicious exchanges prompted Maria and Mariana to alter their approach. They fabricated a story suggesting Du had taken his own life and devised a plan to dismember his remains for disposal. Maria later admitted their scheme was inspired by the TV series Dexter, which depicts a forensic expert who eliminates criminals while erasing evidence by dismemberment. Their actions underscore how communication failures and erratic behavior can raise red flags and bring authorities closer to uncovering the truth, even when efforts are made to mislead investigators. After executing their heinous plan, the women placed Du's body in trash bags and stored it in the trunk of their car. They then drove to an ATM in a shopping mall, where security cameras captured them embracing and laughing. Upon returning home, they began the gruesome task of dismembering the body. Du's torso was eventually placed in a black bag, with the remaining parts disposed of in a container. During these events at Mariana's parental home, friends initiated a campaign to report Du missing, and authorities waited the mandatory 48 hours before officially declaring him absent. Subsequently, the women left the house. Maria drove Du's car toward a cliff near Cabo de San Vicente Lighthouse, with Mariana following in her own vehicle around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Mariana deliberately threw Du's torso off a cliff, leaving his car nearby to suggest he had taken his own life. However, she did not foresee that his remains would become lodged on a rock instead of falling into the sea. The two girls then left together in Mariana's car, driving about 7 kilometers to the Pago do Inferno waterfall in Tavira, where they disposed of what was left of Diogo into the water. Shortly after, Du's vehicle was found parked near the Cabo de San Vicente lighthouse, with reports indicating that 2 laptops were inside. Law enforcement promptly arrived and conducted extensive searches on land and at sea, leading to the discovery of a young man's torso partially wrapped in a black garbage bag along the coast. At the same time, at another coastal site, a French couple made a shocking find: Du's head. After thorough efforts, investigators recovered his hands and feet as well. The case puzzled authorities, especially since Diogo appeared to be a modest individual who avoided social conflicts. Further investigation revealed that he had received substantial compensation following his mother's passing, with significant transfers from his account to Mariana's. Detectives focused on locating Mariana to understand why Du's funds had ended up with her. Mariana then claimed she had killed Diogo to prevent him from abusing her, asserting that this was why she left the hotel before the incident. However, analysis of text messages between the victim and Mariana showed this was untrue. The two had grown closer after Mariana stopped working. During initial police interviews, Mariana admitted she had planned and carried out the killing, insisting that Mariana had no part in it. Yet, her account conflicted with Mariana's, who later told officers that Maria had confided in her about plotting to steal Du's money and intended to kill him so he would reveal his bank details. The evidence collected was enough to convict both girls. Authorities had access to phone records, the victim's mobile device, and ATM surveillance footage. Mariana and Maria were arrested on April 1st of the year 2020 and appeared in court in June. The judge carefully examined Mariana's version of events, during which she pleaded guilty and denied any involvement by Mariana. According to her, Du's body remained in a parked car for 2 days before being dismembered. After hearing Mariana's detailed account, her family was left in shock. The judge repeatedly questioned her about her whereabouts during the dismemberment, which was carried out with surgical precision at the joints. Attention then shifted to Mariana, who had anticipated these inquiries. She explained that, given her employment at a hospital, people assumed she had personally dismembered the body. To clarify, she suggested consulting online resources for verification. Due to the gravity of this cold, calculated, and reckless crime, both individuals received custodial sentences as determined by the court. The trial resumed on February 24th, 2021. During her testimony on February 26th, Mariana revealed that her initial motive was revenge against Diogo for an alleged attempt at violence. However, she emphasized that she never intended to end his life. Her goal was to humiliate him, and she confirmed that her friend had no connection to the young man and was unaware of any violent incident. Mariana also stated that her actions were not driven by financial gain. The two girls appeared in court together but avoided eye contact throughout the proceedings. Rumors circulated that after their arrest and detention, they had decided to end their relationship. The court heard from several witnesses, including forensic expert Teresa Costa. She explained that the amount of DPAM found in Diogo's blood was much lower than expected from 3 ampules, suggesting he either had not taken the prescribed dose or had ingested it many hours before his death. On April 27, 2021, the court delivered its verdict. Mariana was found guilty of aggravated murder, accessory to body desecration, robbery, unlawful access, and fraud. She was also convicted of carjacking and possessing an illegal weapon, resulting in a sentence of 25 years in prison and a fine of €265,000 to Diogo's father. Mariana was acquitted of murder but convicted of desecrating a corpse and complicity in fraud, receiving a 4-year sentence. She was released because none of her offenses involved pretrial detention until the final sentencing. The court concluded that Mariana's attempt to revive Diogo indicated she did not intend to kill him. This decision considered her confession, in which she took full responsibility for her actions. Nonetheless, the verdict was met with disapproval by the Portuguese public, who viewed Mariana as equally culpable in the heinous crime. After the ruling, Mariana exited through the back door, where her father, present at all hearings, awaited her. Both chose to remain silent when approached by reporters. On September 29, 2006, in St. Patrick's Church in Glasgow, United Kingdom, detectives uncovered the body of a young woman. Little did they realize that this crime was only the beginning, leading them to one of the country's most notorious serial offenders, Peter Britton Tobin. Born on August 27, 1946, in Johnstone, Scotland, Peter was the youngest of 8 children in a family headed by Marjorie and Daniel Tobin. From an early age, his challenging personality became apparent, prompting his parents to send him to a boarding school at just 7 years old. This attempt to reform him proved largely ineffective, and later he was placed in a correctional facility. After completing his time there, Peter moved to Brighton, England, where he began a relationship with Margaret Mount, a 17-year-old typist who was captivated by his charm. They married in August of 1969, but Peter's true nature soon surfaced. He was controlling and often cruel. His involvement in criminal activities led to convictions for theft and forgery, resulting in imprisonment. Margaret divorced him in 1973. That same year, Peter remarried Sylvia Jeffrey, a local nurse who was also drawn to his charisma. They had their first son, Ian, but tragedy struck when their daughter Clara died shortly after birth. Overwhelmed by grief and suffering from Peter's abusive behavior, Sylvia left him in 1976 with their young son. Decades later, in his 40s, Peter sought new companionship, this time with Kathy Wilson, a vulnerable 16-year-old girl. Their relationship produced a son, Daniel, and in 1989 they married and moved to Scotland. Kathy's life became increasingly restricted as Peter exerted control over every aspect of her existence. His violent tendencies grew more severe and her living conditions worsened due to her isolation. Eventually, Kathy found the courage to escape with her son in the late 1990s. It remains unclear whether her departure triggered Peter's most destructive behaviors, but from that point onward, he revealed a darker side, capable of causing significant harm. His path crossed with that of Vicky Hamilton, a girl born in 1976 in Scotland. She was the second child of Michael and Janet Hamilton, who had previously welcomed their eldest, Sharon, and later Lee and Lindsay. After their parents' divorce, Vicky, her sister Lindsay, and their mother moved to South London, while Sharon remained in Bathgate. Despite the distance, Vicky and Sharon maintained a close bond. When Vicky turned 15, Sharon saw it as an opportunity for her sister to gain independence, a common desire among teenagers. On a weekend, Vicky traveled alone by bus to Scotland for a visit, a small but meaningful adventure. On Saturday, February the 9th, 1991, the sisters went shopping and spent the day in lively conversation. On a typical Sunday, Vicky's day was uneventful, except for a growing sense of unease about her upcoming journey. The evening of February 10th brought cold, snowy weather as she prepared for her return trip. Confident she had enough funds for the fare, she reviewed her bus route once more with her sister, sharing a warm embrace before heading out. Standing at the bus stop across from the police station, they snacked on chips, unaware that this moment would change everything. It was there that Vicky's fate took a tragic turn. A man forcibly pulled her into his car, and in a horrifying act he assaulted her and ended her life, either out of malice or to silence her from reporting him. He kept her purse, which was found missing after her disappearance, raising suspicion. When Vicky failed to arrive at her mother's house and no contact was made, her family launched a frantic search. Their desperation prompted them to notify authorities, and as the investigation unfolded, Vicky's face became one of the most recognizable in Scotland. The search effort grew into one of the largest in the nation's history. Meanwhile, the perpetrator, Peter, evaded immediate detection by relocating to Margate in southeastern England. There, he settled into a charming house with a garden. In a sinister act, he concealed Vicky's body beneath concrete and soil, disguising her remains as a sandbox for his young son, who was only 3 at the time. During the initial investigation, Peter's name did not surface, and police considered Vicky a likely runaway, believing her to be an unhappy teen due to her parents' divorce. This theory was reinforced when, on February 21st, 1991, her purse was found near Edinburgh's main bus station. Peter, always a step ahead, fabricated this false lead to divert suspicion. For 2 months, investigators searched fruitlessly in London, unaware of his deception. Vicky's mother passed away soon after, adding to the family's grief. Over the next decade, her relatives and local residents kept hope alive, reviewing thousands of files, statements, and evidence. Despite examining more than 7,000 names, collecting nearly 4,000 statements, and analyzing hundreds of documents and physical clues, the case remained unresolved. Eventually, the investigation was shelved. Years later, another young woman encountered Peter, Dina McNichol from Essex. She had a brother and 3 sisters. Her father was a jazz musician, and her mother had tragically died in a car accident many years earlier. By the age of 18, Dana was known for her kindness and cheerful nature, a beloved friend with bright prospects. She had recently finished high school, contemplating a gap year for travel or applying to university, though she had yet to receive responses from any institutions. During the first weekend of August in 1991, Dina attended a music event, unaware that her life was about to take a dark turn. During a festival in Hampshire, she met a young man named David Tremlett. Between dances, they discovered a mutual attraction and spent the night together in a tent on Sunday, August the 4th. The next morning, Dana helped him take down the tent, and they agreed to part ways, each hitchhiking home separately. However, since their routes overlapped for a stretch, they decided to travel together, feeling tired but content. As they waited for a ride, a man named Peter offered them a lift. David was the first to leave the vehicle, and Dana quickly jotted down his phone number before saying farewell. Alone with the stranger, Dina was about to face a terrifying ordeal. On that same Monday, August the 5th, Adna tisiacha deviat sot devianos odin, Peter repeated a heinous act. Using Dina's scarf as a gag, he committed a serious crime similar to one he had previously carried out. Afterward, Peter withdrew money from her bank account at ATMs across Hampshire and Sussex. When her relatives noticed suspicious transactions, they immediately suspected something was wrong. Dina's family knew how carefully she managed her savings and what she intended to do with the money, either travel or further her studies. Weeks passed without any word from Dina, and her family's anxiety grew. Though they kept silent, everyone was convinced something terrible had happened. If Dina were alive, she would have returned or at least contacted them. Meanwhile, Peter left Margate without explanation or farewell. In 1993, he moved to Hampshire, renting an apartment in Leek Park, claiming he wanted to be closer to his son. On August the 4th that year, 2 14-year-old girls visited a local woman but found her absent. They asked neighbors if they had seen her, and eventually they knocked on Peter's door. Seizing an opportunity, he invited them inside to wait for the woman. The girls noticed his 5-year-old son and, trusting the man, agreed to stay. However, there is another version suggesting their meeting was not accidental. They had responded to a babysitting request Peter had made. Trusting him because of his son, they entered his home. Once inside, Peter's true intentions emerged. He tied up the girls, threatened them with a knife, and forced them to drink alcohol. He then assaulted them, injuring one of the girls. Just when it seemed their lives were in peril, A boy woke up, which interrupted the attack and prevented a tragedy, similar to what had happened to Dina and Vicky. To hide his actions from his son and conceal his true nature, Peter decided to leave the apartment with the child. Some reports indicate he departed around 2 o'clock in the morning. Before attempting his sinister plan, he turned on the kitchen gas, hoping to carry out his dark intentions. Fortunately, the girls regained consciousness and managed to escape, alerting the authorities about the abuse they had endured. They provided detailed descriptions of Peter, who had inflicted harm upon them. Afterward, Peter returned his child to his mother and joined a religious group called the Communion of Jesus, adopting a false name in hopes of avoiding detection. Meanwhile, media outlets published his photograph supplied by the police, which made his face widely recognizable. Thanks to extensive media coverage, information about his whereabouts began to surface, and his vehicle was identified through the BBC Crime Watch program. After being on the run for nearly 6 weeks, he was located and apprehended in Brighton. He appeared in court on May 18, 1994, where he admitted to committing sexual assaults and indecent acts against 2 young girls. The court sentenced him to 14 years in prison. However, he did not serve the full term and was released in 2014 at the age of 58. Immediately following his release, he returned to Scotland, attempting to move away from the area where he was registered as a sex offender. For a time, he managed to stay under the radar, living under a false identity and posing as a homeless individual. To avoid detection, he knocked on the door of St. Patrick's Church in Glasgow, adopting the name Peter McLaughlin Dennis. A married couple from the church's charitable group, Dennis and Katie Curran, vividly recall that evening when a homeless man sought shelter. Despite his vulnerable appearance, Katie felt uneasy about him. Raised as a Catholic, Peter quickly felt comfortable in the church, and his apparent neediness served as a convincing disguise, eliciting sympathy from parishioners. Few paid close attention, allowing him to move freely within the church, an ideal hiding place. Yet his predatory instincts remained intact, and being in a sacred space held no significance for him. He carefully planned each step, displaying a desire to assist with church repairs. After about 6 or 7 weeks, he asked the priest if he could join the maintenance team. During a period when many facing financial hardship sought refuge in churches, Angelica Clark, a 23-year-old woman from Poland, crossed paths with him. She had come to Scotland in the summer of 2006, intending to work during her summer break to fund her language studies back home. Living at the parish house of St. Patrick's Church, she also worked as a cleaner. Peter quickly took a liking to her and managed to persuade her to help him with various tasks around the church. On Sunday, September 24, 2006, Angelica spent several hours assisting him with painting a shed. Some parishioners noticed their interaction, but it was during this time that Peter attacked her behind the chapel. From their home overlooking the church, Lyca Brown, age 47, and her husband Andrew, aged 46, heard a woman scream through an open window, marking a tragic moment in the unfolding events. Following her statement, Lyca described a chilling moment, a brief scream that sounded as if someone was being forcibly restrained. The sound was so unsettling that it prompted her to rise from the couch and approach the window, yet she saw nothing. The scream heard by the Browns coincided with a disturbing incident when Peter caught the young girl off guard. She had her back turned to him, and he struck her with force, then dragged her behind the chapel. There he continued to assault her, and after she lost consciousness, he inflicted further injuries, including multiple wounds. He then concealed her body beneath the floor in the basement near the confessional. At that time, Angelica was still alive, but hours passed, and eventually, parishioners noticed her absence. It was then that Dennis informed his wife, Katie, about Angelica's unusual disappearance. Authorities quickly launched an investigation, interviewing community members one by one. During these interviews, it emerged that Peter was the last person seen with Angelica, albeit disguised as Pete, a homeless laborer. This led to him becoming the primary suspect. Police attempted to question him, but initially found no direct evidence linking him to the girl's disappearance. Still, they knew it was only a matter of time before her body was discovered and the truth uncovered. Peter fled to London, where Detective David Swindle joined the case. His suspicions grew that this was not merely a disappearance. Based on testimonies and evidence, Swindle believed Angelica was unlikely to be found alive. On September 29, 2006, authorities uncovered her remains inside the chapel. The news shocked the nation, both due to the brutality of the crime and the choice of hiding place. Examining her injuries led Detective Swindle to suspect that this was not Peter Tobin's first offense. He had yet to realize how deeply dangerous and violent this individual truly was. Further revelations came when DNA evidence from the crime scene matched data in the United Kingdom's National Criminal Database. This confirmed the identity of the perpetrator, Peter Tobin, whose fingerprints were also found at the scene. The authorities' immediate response was to release his photograph across the media nationwide. The Scottish police collaborated with the Metropolitan Police to launch a comprehensive search across the entire country. Meanwhile, in London, Peter attempted to hide by visiting a hospital, claiming to suffer from chest pain and weakness on his left side. Under the alias James Kelly, a plumber, he was examined by Dr. Nick Lasso. However, something in his behavior and demeanor raised suspicion. Initially, Peter's behavior in the hospital was unusual. He avoided eye contact, which is uncommon among most patients. His suspicious demeanor grew when medical tests failed to identify any clear physical reason for his claimed pain. This suspicion was confirmed when a nurse recognized Peter from a photograph circulating in the media, linking him to a known case. Recognizing the potential significance, both the nurse and the doctor contacted law enforcement authorities. This pivotal phone call dramatically shifted the direction of the investigation. On September 30th, police officer Alan Murray was dispatched to the London hospital where Peter was being treated. He was taken into a private room for questioning, and soon after, Peter was detained. Initially, he faced only charges related to failing to register as a sex offender, a tactic that allowed investigators time to gather more substantial evidence. Under the leadership of Detective David, evidence collection continued, ultimately leading to a trial for serious crimes against Angelica in late March of the following year. Despite mounting evidence, Peter maintained his innocence, claiming that any interactions with Angelica were consensual. He also denied providing false information to authorities or hospital staff. However, after 6 weeks of legal proceedings marked by deception and manipulation on his part, the truth emerged. The court found him guilty, sentencing him to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 21 years. Detective David and his team believed there was more to Peter's story than what had been uncovered during the trial. While proceedings were ongoing, they intensified their investigation, gathering additional evidence and compiling a comprehensive dossier. This effort involved multiple law enforcement agencies across the country, working discreetly to avoid disrupting Angelica's case. Their joint operation was codenamed Anagram, and part of their task was to connect missing persons cases to locations where Peter had been. The investigation led to 2 key sites, one in Bathgate and another in Margate. Several weeks later, authorities searched Peter's former coastal residence, uncovering a hidden knife with DNA traces in the attic. The house yielded little else. Subsequently, they examined his current residence in Margate, where investigators uncovered disturbing evidence. In the garden, they excavated a sandbox built by Peter for his son and shockingly discovered a female body buried there. Further search revealed a second body at the same site, along with a woman's handbag which was preserved for DNA testing. Forensic experts worked tirelessly to identify the victims, determine their ages, and estimate their times of death. Traces from the handbag were also analyzed. Although initial DNA results did not produce matches in the national database, a breakthrough occurred on June 1st of the following year when the DNA profile matched Peter's fingerprints. On August 14, 2007, investigators made a significant breakthrough that propelled their inquiry into a crucial new phase. They confirmed that one of the remains discovered belonged to Vicky Hamilton, a 15-year-old girl who had vanished during her first year of independence. Her family had endured 16 long years of uncertainty before this grim confirmation brought some closure. Later, on September 1st, 2008, authorities identified the second set of remains as belonging to an 18-year-old named Dynam MC Nickel, who had been hitchhiking home after attending a concert when he disappeared. Following these developments, the Royal Prosecution Service reached out to Peter's legal representatives, formally charging him with Vicky's murder. His trial drew intense public and media attention. During the proceedings, Vicky's father, Michael, was restrained after confronting Peter directly, overwhelmed with emotion. Michael later explained that his actions stemmed from a desire to make Peter aware of his presence and to honor his daughter's memory. After a month of intense courtroom debate on December 2nd, 2008, Peter was convicted of Vicky's murder and received a life sentence. The trial for Dina took place in December of the following year. On December 16, 2009, the jury found Peter guilty once more, this time of Dina's murder, as the defense had failed to produce evidence proving his innocence. Consequently, he was sentenced to a second life term. In the meantime, reports from November 22, 2007, indicated that Tobin had been assaulted by fellow inmates, sustaining minor injuries. The serial offender had previously confessed to a total of 11 murders. On October 8, 2022, Peter passed away in a hospital. Earlier, on May 25, 2009, emergency services responded to a fire in Portland, Maine. When firefighters extinguished the blaze, they uncovered a chilling scene: a room decorated with crosses and religious symbols and a completely charred body. Disturbingly, the corpse was found to be headless, adding to the horror of the discovery. Zoe Siraki was born on March 25, 1991 in Portland, located in Cumberland County in the northwestern United States. She was raised by her caring parents, John and Linda Siraki, alongside her older brother Gregory and two half-sisters from her father's previous relationship. Her father, a builder, provided well for the family, and Zoe's childhood was filled with artistic influences and creative pursuits. She loved animals, keeping 5 cats at home, and showed an early talent for art. As Zoe grew older, her curiosity and restlessness intensified. She became fascinated with travel and different cultures, dreaming of exploring the world. She adopted a vegan lifestyle, choosing only vegetables and plant-based foods, driven by a desire to protect animals, the environment, and her health. In 2005, Zoe entered high school, where she quickly became known as a cheerful, positive girl with a large circle of friends. However, in 2008, on her 17th birthday, she made a surprising decision that her parents disapproved of. She dropped out of school. Her principal, Ken Coonan, noted that Zoe had become increasingly withdrawn and uncommunicative in her final months at school. Zoe chose not to complete her final year of high school, a decision that reflected her desire to forge her own path. Ken remembered her as a kind and friendly person, well regarded by her classmates, who often interacted with lively, creative peers like herself. A few months after leaving school, Zoe found work at a local bakery and coffee shop called Bagel Works. On March 25, 2009, her 18th birthday, she eagerly looked forward to getting a tattoo on her arm. Inspired by the work of Austrian artist Gustav Klimt, Zoe had a clear vision for her design, viewing it as a symbol of her transition into adulthood. Unaware of the profound influence it would have on her future, Zoe visited a tattoo studio in the Old Port area. There, she met Chad Gurney, a 27-year-old tattoo artist with whom she felt an immediate connection. Within days, Zoe agreed to become Chad's girlfriend, despite their 9-year age difference, which she didn't find troubling. Chad was a distinctive individual. He had attended high school in Wells, Maine, where he gained recognition as a lacrosse goalie, a sport involving teams using small rubber balls and long-handled sticks. After high school, he moved to Lynchburg, Virginia, to study at Liberty University, known for its association with evangelist Jerry Falwell. Chad's body was covered with tattoos, each telling its own story, many depicting alien imagery. One striking tattoo was a gray-toned crocodile, symbolizing danger and predatory instinct, an emblem of hostility and caution. His fascination with extraterrestrial themes often represented a belief in alien life or a desire to express his individuality, signaling that he saw himself as someone who didn't quite fit into the mainstream. Beyond his interest in body art, Chad was passionate about underground dance styles, particularly hardcore dance. This intense form of movement involves vigorous, sometimes aggressive, physical expressions such as lunges, jumps, and acrobatic stunts, ways of releasing energy without self-harm. Those close to Chad described him as resilient, shaped by a serious car accident 4 years earlier. Before moving to Portland in 2005, Chad had suffered severe injuries in Alabama when a van carrying lacrosse players and coaches was rear-ended by a vehicle that collided with a large truck. The crash ejected him from the vehicle, nearly costing him his leg and resulting in around 20 surgeries due to a serious head injury. Despite these hardships, Chad's perseverance and complex personality continued to define him as someone constantly moving forward, seeking new experiences. In 2007, Chad received a substantial financial settlement from a lawsuit following a serious accident, which granted him independence and the means to pursue his passions. An evaluation revealed that he suffered from cognitive impairments affecting his speech, memory, and mathematical reasoning. Over time, Chad also faced mental health challenges, including anxiety and depression, leading to diagnoses of organic personality disorder and post-traumatic stress disorder. In 2009, driven by a desire to explore the world, Chad traveled alone to Hawaii, fueled by a curiosity about different cultures. His love for travel eventually brought him to meet Zoe, with whom he adopted a relaxed, unconventional relationship. They agreed on an open arrangement, allowing both to see others. In May of that year, Chad took a short trip to Vancouver, Canada. Upon his return to Portland, Zoe confided that she had been with another man during his absence and had engaged in sexual relations. Initially, Chad appeared unbothered, trusting their open relationship. However, after this revelation, he began insisting that Zoe leave her job and join him on a spiritual journey to Thailand, a proposal she declined, unaware of the tragic consequences it would bring. On the 25th of May, Zoe visited Chad's apartment feeling exhausted and decided to rest. While she was asleep, Chad attacked her, grabbing her by the neck, hitting her on the head, and strangling her until she lost consciousness. Records indicate that he then engaged in sexual activity with her lifeless body before decapitating her. After committing the crime, Chad took a shower, dressed, and drove to a nearby gas station where he filled a container with gasoline. Returning home, he poured fuel over Zoe's body on the lower floor, creating a trail to the front door before setting the apartment ablaze. He packed a backpack, a laptop, and a shotgun, then left the burning building. Chad withdrew cash from an ATM and checked into a motel in Old Orchard Beach, where he relaxed in a jacuzzi while waiting. Meanwhile, emergency services responded swiftly to the fire, extinguishing the flames and discovering a horrifying scene among the ashes. A charred body surrounded by crosses and religious items. A neighbor called Chad to inform him about the fire, but he claimed he was out of town visiting his hometown of Lewis and quickly ended the call. The following day, Chad confided in his best friend, admitting to the killing of Zoe. He described the events calmly, saying he was exhausted by the pain and could no longer control himself. As he spoke, he drove through Portland streets, carelessly running a red light. A police officer stopped him, and Chad insisted on explaining the situation over the phone. In 2005, Chad was involved in a car accident that potentially impacted his mental health. Following this incident, he confided in a friend and subsequently approached the police, admitting to the murder of Zoe. During the investigation, authorities seized Chad's belongings, including his computer's hard drive, where a forensic expert discovered a disturbing video titled "Woman Half Decapitated," allegedly linked to infidelity. The video's content was later presented as evidence in court. On Wednesday, the 27th of May, the community gathered at Zoe's former high school to honor her memory with a moment of silence during classes. Teachers and students were briefed about the tragedy, and later that day a dedicated room was set up with counselors to support grieving students. Zoe's stepsister, Christine Koop, issued a statement to local media emphasizing the unusual brutality of the crime. She revealed that detectives had told her Chad had attacked Zoe in a fit of rage, sexually assaulted her, and then set her body ablaze before calmly going to a nearby motel to relax in a jacuzzi. A week after Zoe's death, on Tuesday, the 2nd of June 2009, a vigil took place outside Chad's apartment building. It served as a heartfelt tribute to Zoe, with friends, family, and many strangers gathering to pray, light candles, and lay flowers on the steps where her life was tragically ended. Zoe's father, J.N., along with her stepsister, Courtney, visited the scene, moved by the outpouring of support. Meanwhile, law enforcement began interviewing Chad's acquaintances, many of whom described him as a person with a complex personality. Some noted that he sometimes presented himself as a spiritual seeker, adorned with religious artifacts and planning to travel to Thailand to study Eastern philosophies. Others described him as kind and charming, often giving small gifts and expressing a desire to use his inheritance from an accident for humanitarian purposes. Conversely, Chad also cultivated an image of toughness, with tattoos covering his arms and a confrontational attitude. One observer, Robert Collins, a 24-year-old chef, noticed something unusual about Chad. At social gatherings, Chad often shrugged off others and appeared detached. He confided in Robert that he identified primarily with pain, a sentiment reinforced by a tattoo of the word pain on his knuckles. As the investigation progressed, authorities made concerted efforts to gather comprehensive information about the case. Deputy Attorney General Bill Stokes reported that a judge had ordered the seizure of relevant court documents, and records from Chad's past, including rental history, were being examined to piece together the full picture of this tragic event. He also mentioned noticing religious paintings and artifacts in Chad's apartment, indicating Chad's interest in theology, though he did not practice it. Watson Atkinson, owner of another Portland tattoo studio, shared that Chad once confided his desire to use his accident compensation to find himself. He also observed that Chad seemed excessively fixated on teenage girls, which prompted him to prohibit his chestnut-8-year-old daughter from interacting with Chad. Additionally, Watson noted that none of Chad's close friends could have predicted how dark his thoughts had become during the early stages of the investigation. Chad's medical history and mental health diagnoses were reviewed, but during custody, several psychologists evaluated him and found no signs of delusions or hallucinations. In conversations with specialists, Chad admitted to having intense feelings about Zoe's infidelity and expressed disappointment over her actions. Court documents revealed that he was weary of the unfaithfulness of all his girlfriends. These discussions painted a picture of a depressed individual who began contemplating harm to Zoe after her confession. Chad told 3 different psychologists that he engaged in sexual acts with her remains because he believed he had already committed a terrible act and was pondering what worse deed he could do next. When his trial commenced, a police interrogation lasting over 2 hours was leaked. During the 12-hour interview with Detective Danham, Chad stated that he and Zoe got along well, and that she sometimes stayed in his apartment for about a week without arguments. He described them as soulmates, emphasizing her honesty. Chad claimed he had taken the life of the most beautiful girl he had ever known and felt it was important to be truthful to his victim. Throughout the interview, he remained composed, apologized repeatedly, and shed tears several times. Chad recounted that on May 25, 2009, Zoe was napping when he approached her and began to strangle her. She fought to save herself and begged him to stop. He admitted that when she resisted, he hit her on the head and continued strangling until she stopped breathing. He then detailed the brutal acts he committed with her body, mentioning that he used 3 knives, not a samurai sword as initially thought, for her decapitation. He described placing a cross between her legs and spoke about everything he did while her body burned in the apartment. Throughout the interrogation, Chad repeatedly called himself a terrible person. When asked why he decapitated Zoe, he explained that he was trying to turn her death into a ritual of forgiveness. Struggling to find a clear reason, he said he felt possessed and described that, on the day of the murder, everything in his life seemed to fade away. He explained that for several hours he felt as if he had become a shadow of himself, overwhelmed by a dark force. The case centered around a young man driven by primal instincts, which led him to commit a horrifying act. This interrogation played a crucial role as evidence in Cumberland County's Supreme Court during the initial proceedings. Prosecutors presented a recording lasting 2.5 hours to Judge Roland Cole, revealing the defendant's mindset. Discussions during the hearings indicated that Chad could face a minimum of 25 years or potentially life imprisonment. In a DVE Tisiachi Odenatsat hearing, it was suggested that recognizing his mental health issues might result in his transfer to a psychiatric facility in Austria. It was established that the defendant had strangled his victim in a fit of rage, though it remained uncertain whether Chad, who waived his right to a jury trial, agreed with this assessment. At the time, the prosecution argued that Chad, a former Liberty University student and lacrosse champion, was fully aware of his actions. Expert witnesses, including a psychiatrist and psychologist, testified that he understood what he was doing and consciously decided to kill his girlfriend. The defense, however, emphasized Chad's mental health struggles, claiming he was ashamed and feared losing control. On January 11, 2012, Chad's lawyer attempted to have evidence from his client's personal devices dismissed, arguing that a disturbing video found there, showing how to decapitate an unfaithful woman, should not have been admitted. Nearly 3 years after the crime, in March of 2012, 30-year-old Chad Gurney was sentenced to 50 years for the murder of Zoe Siraki and an additional 25 years for arson. The judge ordered these sentences to be served consecutively. His lawyers appealed, but the appeal was denied. Zoe's family had hoped for a life sentence. During sentencing, the presiding judge noted that the defendant's perception of reality appeared abnormal, but the key issue was whether he understood his actions were wrong. Chad's attorney, Sarah Churchill, argued that injuries from a DVE Tisiachi Piat accident left her client in a constant state of delusion. She claimed the judge erred by finding Chad guilty without properly considering evidence from his devices, which included the disturbing video. Churchill contended that greater weight should have been given to evidence of Chad's psychosis and alienation at the time of the crime, rather than the digital evidence. The deputy attorney general countered, asserting that Chad's motive was revenge for Zoe's perceived betrayal, and that no social media information was used against him. The evidence overwhelmingly demonstrated that he was aware of his actions during the incident. After the trial, Zoe's aunt, Kathy Kosev, expressed her distress, recalling how she felt overwhelmed witnessing Chad during the proceedings, reflecting her deep emotional pain. Annie Tayan, a young mother of 24, faced a heartbreaking and mysterious end to her life. One day, she suddenly disappeared without explanation, leaving her partner and their newborn daughter behind. Despite ongoing efforts over more than 4 years to find her, no concrete clues emerged. Born on May 1, 1965, Annie was raised by her mother and found joy in dancing, simple pleasures, and lively activities. She always dreamed of a large family, viewing motherhood as her life's greatest purpose. Her maternal journey began early, welcoming her first son, Jimmy, at 18, followed by Sean a year later. By the time she was 20, she had a third child, Shane. Tragically, shortly after Shane's birth, their father chose to abandon the family, leaving Annie to raise 3 young children alone in a rented apartment in Maine. When Shane was just 6 months old and Annie was 22, she met Michael Palin, a 32-year-old Navy petty officer stationed on the aircraft carrier Brawny. Their paths crossed in Portland, Maine, where Michael's ship was docked. He quickly became captivated by Annie during an encounter at the waterfront. While living in Charleston, South Carolina, Michael earned respect in the Navy as a computer systems operator, actively participating in military operations and receiving several awards. Annie was drawn to his naval career and soon fell in love. She confided in a friend that she believed she had found a man worthy of her affection. After months of dating, they decided to build a life together, blending her children and their relationship. However, tragedy struck when a fire erupted in their apartment. At that time, Annie was not at home. Michael was alone with her children. He managed to escape with Jimmy and Sean, who could walk, but Shane, then a toddler, was unable to get out in time. Sadly, Shane lost his life in the blaze. Annie, upon returning, tried to re-enter the burning building to save her daughter, but was restrained by neighbors. The loss of Shane left an indelible scar on Annie's heart, creating an unfillable void. Investigators faced difficulties determining the fire's cause, as the circumstances appeared suspicious. Despite their suspicions, the investigation concluded without identifying any responsible party. Following this tragedy, Annie moved with her sons to her mother's home in Portland. Meanwhile, Michael, deeply affected, focused on his work and chose to live in the military barracks. Several months later, another troubling incident occurred near Annie's mother's residence, adding to the series of unsettling events surrounding her life. In a quiet backyard, a shed unexpectedly caught fire, prompting investigators to swiftly determine its origin. They uncovered a lighter engraved with the name Bromby, the vessel associated with Michael Palin, suggesting his possible involvement. Despite this compelling evidence, authorities could not definitively link him to the blaze due to a lack of concrete proof. Following a second fire incident, child welfare officials and local authorities recognized that Annie's sons, Jimmy and Sean, were in a potentially hazardous environment under her care. As a result, they decided to remove the children from her custody and place them in foster homes managed by social services. This decision devastated Annie, who desperately sought to regain her children's trust and return them to her care. Her relentless efforts caused her profound emotional pain, leaving her heartbroken over the separation. When Michael's vessel returned to Charleston, South Carolina, he rented an apartment and reconnected with Annie. Despite their troubled past, Annie agreed to communicate with him and eventually moved into a home with him in Goose Creek, a suburb of Charleston. Their life together seemed to take a new turn until Annie made a startling discovery, a photograph showing Michael wearing a wedding ring. Confronted, Michael admitted he was married but had long been divorced. He explained that his ex-wife, Dawn Breeze, and their 3 children lived with his mother in Savannah, Georgia. Although Michael insisted he had no ongoing relationship with Dawn, Annie was deeply unsettled by the revelation. She considered leaving him, but ultimately chose to stay, seeing him as a suitable partner to build a family with. However, their relationship soon soured. Michael's behavior toward Annie grew increasingly hostile and demeaning. When Annie learned she was pregnant again, she hesitated to leave, feeling hopeful about her expanding family. In October of 1989, just a month before her disappearance, Annie gave birth to her 4th daughter, Jade. While she knew Jade could never replace her lost child, she felt a special bond with her, filling a void in her heart. Tragically, after Jade's arrival, Michael's treatment of Annie worsened. He began openly insulting and humiliating her, creating an oppressive atmosphere. Fearing for her safety, Annie confided in a close friend about her fears of Michael's relentless control. Her situation grew more alarming when she discovered that Michael had confined her to their apartment while he was at work, disconnecting the phone and hiding it in his briefcase. Just 2 days before her disappearance, in a state of distress, Annie reached out to her trusted friend, Katie French. During their phone call, she revealed her plans to leave Michael. However, Michael had responded that if she left, their daughter Jade would remain with him, intensifying her fears and sense of helplessness. In a moment of crisis, Annie found herself overwhelmed with emotion and desperately begged Katie to come immediately and rescue her and her daughter Jade. Unfortunately, Katie was occupied and unable to assist in that moment. Instead, she sent Annie money for a bus ticket, hoping it would help her escape. Little did they know, this heartfelt exchange would be their final conversation. 2 days later, on November 7th, 1989, Katie tried to reach Annie but received no answer. Several days passed before Michael Palin informed her that Annie had packed her belongings and left in an unknown direction, seemingly planning to contact her from her new location. Katie waited anxiously, but 2 weeks went by without any word. By Thanksgiving, on the 24th of November, Annie had been unreachable for 20 days, and her growing silence deepened Katie's concern. She reached out to Annie's friends and acquaintances, but no one knew her whereabouts. When she attempted to report Annie as missing, the police explained she could not file an official report because she was not a blood relative. Months slipped by with no sign of Annie. Eventually, Katie obtained Michael Palin's mother's phone number. When she called, she was shocked to learn that Jade was in her care. This revelation confirmed Katie's worst fears. She knew Annie would never abandon her daughter willingly. Despite these troubling developments, Michael Palin showed little concern about Annie's disappearance. He made no efforts to contact authorities or search for her. Soon he was transferred to the naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. Months later, after Annie's mother reported her missing, an official investigation was finally launched. The initial focus was on her live-in partner, Michael Palin, who quickly became the prime suspect. He claimed that on the morning of November 6th, he had woken to find Annie gone, leaving their daughter in his care. He said that the night before, Annie had expressed a desire to end their relationship. Believing their relationship was definitively over, he did not try to find her or contact her again, claiming he was unaware she was missing or that she had not been in touch with family or friends. Police searched their rented apartment but found no evidence, no clues or suspicious items that could shed light on her disappearance. The case soon reached a standstill, with no large-scale search initiated and her whereabouts remaining a mystery. Whether she was still alive or if someone had taken her, the motives behind her disappearance remained unknown. The only certainty was that the last person to see her was her partner, Michael. For 4 long years, there was no news or sightings of Annie, leaving her loved ones in limbo. Katie's close friend, the only active seeker involved in the investigation, tirelessly collaborated with authorities. She had invested around $16,000 solely on phone bills, hired a private investigator, and remained resolute in her efforts to uncover the truth. Her outreach extended to various organizations that might shed light on Michael Palin's background. She strongly believed that Michael was a dangerous individual and could not be trusted. Fearing that he might discover her involvement with law enforcement, she was deeply concerned about her safety. In 1993, a major breakthrough occurred when Annie Tawn's case was transferred to the Naval Criminal Investigative Service. This shift marked a turning point, prompting NCIS agents to re-examine the case from the beginning. Their investigation led them to Michael Palin, who was found at the naval base in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. When officers approached him to discuss Annie's disappearance, he insisted he would only talk if his lawyer was present. Later, he ceased cooperating entirely, refusing to provide any further information. The Marine Police collected all available details about Annie's disappearance and reached out to law enforcement in South Carolina. They requested records of any unidentified bodies, noting that Annie had given birth a month before she vanished. South Carolina authorities shared a case involving a woman who had also given birth shortly before her death. A facial sketch of this woman was provided, and upon seeing it, the Marine Police became convinced they had found Annie. The scene of her death was brutal. Her body was discovered beside a highway in Jasper County, South Carolina, roughly 100 miles from where she had lived with Michael. The crime scene photos revealed extreme violence. Annie's face was badly damaged, and her skull was shattered into 124 pieces, requiring nearly 500 hours of painstaking reconstruction. Her body had been placed in a naval bag soaked in gasoline and then set ablaze. The burning bag was found at 6 o'clock in the morning on November 7th, 1989, the same time Katie noticed Annie had stopped answering her calls. Dental records confirmed her identity as Annie Tan. This discovery made Michael Palin the prime suspect in her murder. Authorities quickly devised a detailed investigation plan, beginning with a close examination of his financial activities. On the day Annie disappeared, investigators found that Michael made a credit card purchase about 25 miles south of where her remains were found. A review of his phone records revealed that on November 6th, he made 2 calls to his mother's house in Savannah, the first at 4:30 Piat AM, and the second at Piat das 17 AM. Based on the available evidence, investigators theorized that Michael may have murdered Annie in their apartment before transporting her body to the roadside, where he set it ablaze to hinder the investigation. Their goal was to locate Michael Palin's former wife, Dawn Breeze, who at the time of Annie's disappearance was still married to him and residing at her mother's house in Savannah. After Annie's disappearance, Don divorced Michael and began moving frequently across different states, seemingly trying to evade someone or something. Eventually, authorities tracked her down in Miami, Florida during the summer of 1995, nearly 6 years after Annie's death. By that point, Don had become involved in spiritual practices as a source of income. When agents approached her at her workplace to discuss Annie's case, her composed response was unexpected. She even inquired how long the interview would last, indicating she wanted enough time to eat. Her calm demeanor contrasted sharply with what the investigators anticipated, as they expected her to show more emotion when discussing Annie. However, during a lengthy 10-hour interrogation, inconsistencies in her story began to surface. Initially, Don's account aligned with Michael's version, claiming he had told her that his mistress had left him and that he intended to raise their daughter alone when she visited his apartment. But discrepancies emerged regarding the timing of her visit to Michael's residence. At one point, Don fell silent, looked downward, and then expressed a desire to tell the truth, an unusual moment that revealed her emotional detachment. Without tears, she recounted details she had kept secret for 6 years. Don revealed that, early one morning, Michael urgently called her to his apartment. Upon arrival, she found Annie Ton's lifeless body on the living room floor. Michael then went to the bedroom to meet their daughter. At that time, Don and Michael were still legally married and shared 3 children. Michael admitted to having an affair with Annie, which resulted in the birth of a daughter. He begged Don to accept the child and help raise her, but fearing a custody dispute, Michael chose to murder Annie instead. On the night of November 5th to 6th, 1989, Michael and Annie went to bed after a moment of intimacy. Once Annie fell asleep, Michael took a crowbar and began to attack her viciously. Their daughter Jade was lying beside Annie on the bed during the assault. Michael relentlessly struck Annie's head, each blow more brutal than the last. Despite her strength, Annie eventually succumbed to her injuries right there in bed. In a chilling turn, Michael then contacted Don, urgently requesting her presence. He placed Annie's body into a naval bag, transferred it to the trunk of his car, and stored a canister of gasoline alongside it. Before setting out on a long drive of about 100 miles, Michael placed his daughter in the back seat of the car. After stopping at a secluded spot by the roadside, he removed Annie's body from the trunk, soaked it in gasoline, and ignited it. Once the fire was well underway, he hurried back to the vehicle and drove Dawn and Jade to his mother's house in Savannah. Dawn Breeze's revelation marked a crucial breakthrough in the investigation, providing the first significant evidence since the discovery of Annie's remains. Subsequently, investigators asked Dawn to make a monitored phone call to her ex-husband Michael, during which she discussed Annie's death. She agreed and contacted him accordingly. Michael expressed that a serious conversation was needed as Annie's body had been found and identified. His response, "No, they didn't do that," suddenly confirmed the investigators' suspicions about Dawn's account. During the call, Dawn also informed Michael that blood had been detected in their former apartment, and NCIS suspected their involvement. She urged him to come up with an explanation for the bloodstains, to which Michael replied, "Okay, we need to work together and come up with something." Although he hadn't been given specific instructions, his tone indicated he understood the gravity of the situation. He avoided unnecessary questions or denials, suggesting he was aware of what had transpired. This interaction reinforced the theory that Annie had been murdered in Michael's apartment. Near the end of their conversation, Michael advised Dawn to be cautious with her phone communications, emphasizing they would handle the situation together. NCIS agents then took Dawn to the crime scene to gather any remaining evidence and protect her identity as a cooperating witness. She was disguised during the visit. At the apartment, Dawn carefully described the placement of Annie's body and the sequence of events. She pointed out a spot near a wall and baseboard where a significant amount of blood had pooled, affecting both the carpet and the concrete beneath. Since Michael had vacated the apartment, the landlords had replaced and cleaned the carpets multiple times, which explained the absence of visible traces. However, when investigators applied a special chemical to the concrete floor, a large purple stain appeared, indicating the presence of proteins consistent with blood. This aligned with Dawn's account of where Annie had been lying, but the NCIS team faced difficulties in conclusively confirming the substance as blood. They continued searching for additional physical evidence. Don also mentioned the nightstand with a television near the bed where Annie was killed. She observed that the TV had been splattered with blood during the incident, and Michael had later said it needed extensive cleaning due to stains. He eventually disposed of the television, possibly intending to sell it rather than discard it, reflecting his frugal nature and focus on functional items. Despite the daunting challenge of finding a needle in a haystack, investigators remained determined to uncover the truth. By this stage, Michael Palin had become aware of NCIS surveillance activities, especially after a phone call with his ex-wife, Dawn. This realization heightened his paranoia, making him hyper-aware of the agency's monitoring efforts. NCIS agents, concerned that Michael might attempt to escape, threaten others, or take drastic actions, intensified their watch. During a surveillance operation, Michael tried to evade authorities, but his efforts were quickly thwarted. Law enforcement swiftly apprehended him, and on October 11, 1995, he was taken into custody and held in a military detention facility. Under suspicion of involvement in a murder case from November of 1989, investigators meticulously examined all residents of the apartment complex where the crime occurred. Their persistence paid off 3 months later when a neighbor revealed he had purchased a television from Michael. Remarkably, the device was still operational and in his home. The police seized the television and sent it to the FBI laboratory for detailed forensic testing. The forensic analysis uncovered 11 bloodstains inside the speaker of the television. These samples matched the DNA of Annie Ton, providing a crucial link to the ongoing investigation. At this point, Michael Palin's legal team indicated he was willing to plead guilty if the death penalty was removed from the table. Although the prosecutor was dissatisfied with the situation, military law required such negotiations to be formalized during the trial. Michael admitted guilt with a detached demeanor, recounting his actions in a monotone that lacked remorse or empathy. His confession was almost clinical, as if listing routine facts. Consequently, Michael Palin was convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. He also received a dishonorable discharge from the Navy. Throughout this period, Dawn Breeze, aware of her husband's involvement, but remaining silent for 6 years, avoided legal repercussions after providing a critical confession to NCIS. Her honesty significantly advanced the investigation. Annie's children, her sons and daughter, were informed about their mother's tragic fate and understood she had not abandoned them. Jade, Annie's daughter with Michael, grew into a remarkable woman within the Palmer family, notably maintaining no relationship with her father. In a surprising turn, Michael Palin was released in 2013 after serving just over 17 years, thanks to good behavior. His current whereabouts remain unknown, and anyone who encounters him is advised to exercise caution. Born on August 16, 1940 in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, Ronald Vincey's entrepreneurial spirit was evident from a young age. In his 20s, he launched his first business by renting space on California's Pacific coast to sell Honda motorcycles. Over time, his modest shop expanded into one of the largest Honda dealerships in the state. Vincey's success continued as he opened multiple car dealerships, steadily increasing his wealth. Colleagues often described him as determined and resolute, known for his strong will and high standards as an employer. His personal life included a previous marriage to Pamela, with whom he had a son named Carrie. Their union eventually ended in divorce after several years. Following the breakup, Vincey embraced a luxurious lifestyle, investing in extravagant possessions. He developed a passion for collecting aircraft and helicopters, even building a large hangar to house his collection. Residing in a spacious home in Rancho Santa Fe, California, he went to great lengths to obtain county approval for a helicopter pad on his property, despite neighbor opposition. This allowed him to commute directly from his estate by helicopter. Additionally, helicopter pads were installed on the roofs of his dealerships to facilitate aerial travel. In 1990, the paths of 50-year-old Vincey and 34-year-old Catherine Pye unexpectedly crossed in the skies. Catherine, working as a flight attendant, came from a modest family in rural Georgia. During her youth, she participated in beauty pageants, captivating others with her charm, grace, and radiant smile. Her attractive appearance and warm personality drew many admirers. After completing her education, Catherine worked as a lab technician at a veterans hospital, but she yearned for more. In 1980, she made a pivotal career shift, leaving her hospital job to join Delta Airlines as a flight attendant. At that time, her annual income was around $20,000. She enjoyed her new role, caring for passengers and serving meals, and even gained practical tips like using coffee grounds to neutralize odors on airplanes. A decade into her career in 1990, Catherine experienced a life-changing encounter aboard a flight when she met Vinci, a millionaire immediately captivated by her charm and friendly demeanor. Despite a 14-year age difference, their connection grew quickly, leading her to leave her airline job and move into Vinci's luxurious California home. Together, they shared a passion for travel, often visiting Aspen, Colorado, a favorite retreat for the couple. Ronald and Catherine's relationship lasted a decade, yet he never proposed marriage. Eventually, they parted ways, each seeking new beginnings. In April of 2001, Catherine, then 45, moved to Florida and entered a relationship with 63-year-old Delio Carano, a financially secure insurance agent. They met through mutual friends, and Catherine confided in Delio about her previous tumultuous marriage with Ronald Vinci, describing it as unhappy and fraught with insults, heavy drinking, and extramarital affairs. Yet she still hoped for a marriage proposal from Ronald, which never materialized. Instead, Ronald quickly proposed to Catherine, and they married in May, just a month after meeting. She appeared genuinely happy with her new life. After tying the knot, they settled in Miami Beach. Delio recalled that Catherine's early demeanor was gentle and reserved, akin to a calm domestic cat with modest eating habits. She also harbored a deep fear of water. She couldn't bathe in oceans or rivers without intense anxiety. However, a few months into their marriage, Delio noticed a stark change in her behavior. Catherine began demanding large sums of money, often requesting funds for clothing and gifts, and comparing him unfavorably to more generous spouses among her friends. He estimated she was withdrawing around $55,000 each month, citing educational expenses as justification, yet she failed to provide receipts or proof of these costs. After enduring this financial drain for several months, Delio concluded that rushing into marriage had been a mistake and decided to seek a divorce. Given that they had no children or shared property, the separation process was relatively simple. Court records indicated that Delio Carano's net worth was $4 million. In 2005, Catherine had only $88,000 in her accounts, while Ronald Vinci's wealth soared into the millions. As she prepared to leave Delio's house, she expressed deep sadness and despair, lamenting her lack of success and questioning the meaning of her life. Meanwhile, Ronald, a millionaire, made a pivotal decision to relocate to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, persuaded by friends who praised its favorable climate and low taxes. By then, he had already sold his car dealerships and amassed considerable wealth, settling into a luxurious apartment on the 4th floor, relishing the comfort of his new home. That same year, Ronald rekindled his relationship with Catherine, a flight attendant he had previously dated. She moved into his apartment, reigniting their connection. Interestingly, Catherine's ex-husband, Delio Carano, also lived in the same building, though 30 floors below. Delio couldn't understand why Catherine chose to reconnect with the man she once described as a monster. As their relationship deepened, Catherine became increasingly fixated on marrying Ronald. Both Ronald and Catherine had ceased working, leading a relaxed lifestyle that highlighted their contrasting personalities. Ronald, overweight and fond of rich foods, enjoyed lively parties and social outings. Catherine, on the other hand, maintained a slender figure of just 42 kilograms by eating sparingly and preferred quiet evenings immersed in crime stories. She rarely wore dresses, favoring shorts and sneakers. Despite her fears of the ocean, she traveled with Ronald, crossing seas by boat and visiting Caribbean islands, an adventure Ronald encouraged her to pursue, aiming to help her overcome her phobia. Although Ronald was wealthy, he often frequented budget-friendly bars along Fort Lauderdale's waterfront with friends. There, he would order a taco and strong drinks, sometimes flirting with women. He joked that his appeal to men had long faded. Their home was often lively, with gatherings where Ronald indulged in alcohol and grew more outspoken. At times, he publicly insulted Catherine in front of friends, implying she owed everything to him. Catherine usually remained passive, quietly serving drinks and attending to Ronald's guests, illustrating their stark differences. Ronald's extroverted, indulgent nature contrasted sharply with Catherine's introverted, submissive demeanor. This pattern persisted for 5 years, yet Ronald hesitated to propose marriage. By 2010, he confided in friends about his desire to end their relationship and seek a younger partner. In early 2011, Ronald Vinci faced hospitalization due to severe intestinal issues, likely caused by years of unhealthy habits. In June of 2011, Ronald Vinci, a 70-year-old man, made a notable investment by purchasing a luxurious waterfront residence in Fort Lauderdale, valued at $3 million. Situated just a short distance from his yacht, this new home symbolized his desire for comfort and a peaceful retirement. Ronald looked forward to spending his remaining years there, eagerly awaiting visits from his only son, Carrie, who worked as a waiter, and his grandson. Ronald often joked that Carrie was eagerly awaiting his passing, a remark reflecting their familiar, if somewhat dark, humor. Despite his plans for tranquility, Ronald's health was declining, largely due to his excessive alcohol consumption and a habit of taking numerous pills to relax and sleep better. His doctors attributed his ailments to alcohol, but Vinci himself noticed a change in his food's taste. A friend jokingly suggested that perhaps Catherine, his companion, had tried to poison him. Ronald dismissed this idea at first, yet in reality, his neglect of his health was taking a serious toll. On the afternoon of June 28th, a distressing call from Ronald's gardener changed everything. The gardener reported discovering Vinci's body in a guest bedroom. When police arrived, they found the millionaire's body carefully wrapped in plastic bags, tightly taped, and placed inside a sleeping bag along with soiled sheets. On top of the bundle was a substance resembling wet dirt, later identified as coffee grounds. An examination revealed a slash mattress beneath the blanket, suggesting a violent struggle. The gardener told officers that Catherine had claimed Ronald had fallen down the stairs, injuring his head before passing away. However, investigators suspected foul play. During questioning, the gardener recounted that Catherine had called him late at night, urgently requesting his presence. Upon arriving in the morning, he found Vinci's body wrapped and prepared for burial. Catherine, visibly distressed and tearful, begged for help in laying Ronald to rest in the ocean, fulfilling his lifelong wish. She had purchased a blue container to transport his body by yacht, intending to release him at sea. By the time authorities were alerted, she had already brought the container home and stored it in the garage. A thorough autopsy revealed a brutal scene. Ronald had suffered 9 stab wounds to his chest and neck, with signs of hammer blows on his head. Ultimately, he died from a gunshot wound to the head. The medical examiner's findings painted a grim picture of violence and premeditation. The previous evening, friends had gathered at Vinci's house, where Catherine prepared a meal and served drinks. During the evening, Ronald mentioned that his passport and one of his pistols were missing, and complained that the food tasted unusually bitter. Known for staying up late, he had gone to bed as early as 7:30 that evening, a departure from his usual routine. These details, combined with the evidence, pointed to a complex and troubling series of events leading to his untimely death. On the evening of June 28th, an unusual incident unfolded that would forever alter the lives involved. His friends, noticing his early bedtime, found it strange and soon left his house. A few hours later, Catherine, aged 54, was brought in for questioning. She provided a detailed account of the events that transpired that night, shedding light on a series of distressing moments. Around 1 o'clock in the morning, Ronald Vinci, intoxicated, woke up and began verbally abusing Catherine. The situation quickly escalated when he chased her down the stairs, lost his footing, and fell, hitting his head hard. Catherine claimed she helped him to his feet and guided him into a guest bedroom on the ground floor. Later, she cleaned bloodstains from the staircase. Several hours afterward, she checked on Ronald, finding him asleep with a loaded firearm on the bedside table. Fearing that he might harm her, Catherine acted out of panic and desperation. She seized the gun and shot him in the head. During questioning, she admitted she was overwhelmed with fear and anger, feeling as if her soul had left her body. After the shooting, she inflicted additional wounds on Ronald using a knife and a hammer. She then wrapped his body in a bag and tried to hide the evidence by calling the gardener. When she realized she couldn't dispose of the body alone, surveillance footage showed her purchasing a large blue container at a hardware store intended for dumping Ronald's remains into the ocean. Authorities later found a firearm matching the one used in the shooting, with Catherine's fingerprints on it, in her car. Her Bentley contained other incriminating items, such as a knife, torn pieces of a mattress, clothing, and rubber gloves, all stained with Ronald's blood. As a result, Catherine was charged with first-degree murder and placed under arrest. Further investigation revealed that just a month prior, Catherine had been involved in a legal dispute with her sister over borrowed money, which Catherine claimed was a gift and thus not repayable, and the court ruled in her favor on May 17th. Neighbors reported hearing screams from Ronald's house on the night of the incident, and a witness saw a white vehicle with a large trailer near the residence early that morning. Ronald's friends disclosed that he had been contemplating ending his relationship with Catherine for some time. They had not been intimate for months and even slept in separate rooms within their large home. A few weeks before the tragedy, Ronald had attempted to offer Catherine $1 million through an associate, urging her to leave his house permanently. Prosecutors believed her primary motive was fear of losing her wealthy partner, though her defense argued she was a victim of circumstances beyond her control. Severe abuse during her relationship with Ronald raised questions about her delayed police contact, her honesty, and her endurance of mistreatment over many years. Some of Catherine's relatives defended her in court, and a psychiatrist noted signs of domestic violence, yet none of Ronald's close acquaintances reported witnessing any abuse firsthand. They described Catherine as composed and never expressing dissatisfaction with her life during the proceedings. In a shocking turn, Catherine accused Ronald Vinci of being responsible for her younger sister, Angela's, sudden death 3 years earlier. In December, Angela, who struggled with substance issues, had gone on a Caribbean cruise with Catherine and Ronald. During a party, Angela drank heavily, became severely ill, and experienced convulsions. In her attempt to help, Catherine performed artificial respiration, but tragically, Angela's heart stopped, leading to her passing. It was later revealed that Ronald had given Angela pills that evening, likely to help her relax, and Catherine believed these contributed to her sister's death. In 2014, a jury convicted Catherine PGI of Ronald's murder, resulting in a 25-year sentence. She is now incarcerated at the L Correctional Institution in Marin County, Florida, with a projected release date in January of the year of her 77th birthday. The story of Ronald Vinci, a successful and wealthy man, took a tragic turn due to his ill-fated relationship with the quiet and unassuming flight attendant, Catherine PGI. Despite his many wise choices in life, this relationship proved to be his downfall. A wealthy businesswoman tired of solitude and with a substantial fortune met a charming anesthesiologist, and from their first encounter, passion ignited fiercely. However, not everyone was pleased with their happiness. Deborah, the central figure of this story, was a stylish, successful, and quite affluent woman. Her wealth was not luck, but the result of years of dedication and hard work in the interior design industry, culminating in the founding of her own firm, Ambrosia. Over more than 3 decades, Deborah poured her passion into her career, yet her personal life told a different story. Despite 4 marriages, each ending in separation, and being a devoted mother to 4 children, her romantic relationships consistently fell short. Having secured her financial future, Deborah longed for something more meaningful, the simple joy of family happiness. Her life took a significant turn when she encountered the man who would change her path, but that story remains intertwined with the tragic events surrounding the others involved. Several years ago, A tragic event left a deep scar on a family. In March of 1984, Cindy's older sister was taken from her in a violent act committed by Billy Vickers. During the subsequent trial, their mother testified against Cindy and expressed her support for Vickers, which resulted in him receiving only a light sentence and serving just a few years behind bars for this grievous act. Billy and Cindy had 2 children together, and this ordeal left lasting emotional wounds for all involved. Following the tragedy, Deborah struggled with intense anxiety and frequent panic attacks, especially when it came to firearms. Living alone for an extended period did little to ease her fears. Despite friends' advice to carry a weapon for protection, she found the idea of having a firearm nearby intolerable. Deborah was meticulous about her appearance and surrounded herself with beautiful things. She dedicated significant time and resources to skincare, makeup, and hair care, accumulating a collection of stylish items such as Chanel jewelry, Cartier watches, denim apparel, and Gucci shoes. The only thing missing from her life was a committed partner. John Mayen, a central figure in this story, was born on February 3, 1958, in California. He grew up with 2 sisters, Karen and Donna. His father, known for dishonest and fraudulent dealings, influenced John early on, leading him into a life of deception and illegal activities. He was involved in schemes, dealt in illicit substances, and used drugs himself, which brought him into frequent conflict with law enforcement. These issues culminated in his banishment from California in 1988. John completed his undergraduate degree at Arizona State University, earning a Bachelor of Arts, and later joined the University of Dayton's law faculty. Known among friends as Dirty John, he was notably handsome, standing about 6 feet 3 inches tall, with hazel green eyes and thick dark hair. His charming smile often drew women to him. After finishing his studies, John met Tanya Sells, a nurse anesthetist, and they married in November of 1990 when she was 25 and he 31. Their relationship was built on deception. John kept Tanya isolated from his family, claiming they were malicious. She supported him through medical school in Tennessee and helped him obtain his license as an anesthesiologist. The couple had 2 children, but over time, their marriage began to unravel. Tanya uncovered from John's mother and sisters that he had lied about his past and discovered his secret stash of pills, stolen from patients and used by him, explaining his volatile temper. She promptly reported his behavior to the authorities. John admitted to the allegations, but chose to flee rather than face arrest. He took refuge in a hotel in Michigan, where police quickly located him. Found unconscious amid empty pill containers, he was rushed to the hospital. En route, he regained consciousness, seized a vial of medication, and made a sudden escape. After being rescued from an ambulance, he was quickly detained and subsequently received a 6-year sentence in Michigan for resisting arrest and illegal drug possession. Remarkably, he served only about 691 days before his sentence was reduced, leading to his release in 2004. During this period, he met Deborah, a woman aged 55, while he was 59. They decided to explore online dating, which eventually brought them together. Deborah was drawn to John's profile, where he described himself as a divorced doctor and a devout Christian seeking love. After a series of disappointing encounters, Deborah was pleasantly surprised upon meeting John in person. He showed genuine interest in her life, praised her achievements, and seemed different from others she had met. Their first date took place in October of 2014 at a restaurant called Houston in Irvine, California. John aimed to impress Deborah by sharing fabricated stories about his past, such as working with Doctors Without Borders in Iraq, mentioning 2 children, and owning multiple properties. Deborah envisioned him as a dedicated, altruistic physician committed to global service. John treated her like royalty, which fulfilled her long-standing desire for companionship. He even expressed eagerness to meet her family, and his charming words made her heart flutter. After their dinner, they went to her penthouse, but John overstepped boundaries. Following a few kisses, he tried to escalate their intimacy, making Deborah uncomfortable. She asked him to leave. The next morning, John called to apologize, explaining that he had consumed too much alcohol and couldn't control his emotions. His honesty improved her opinion of him, and they continued dating. As their relationship developed, Deborah and John spent more time together. On their third date, John declared his love and proposed. She was so happy to have found companionship that she overlooked some oddities. For example, John often wore well-worn medical scrubs, even at fashionable events or gatherings organized by Deborah, claiming he had no time to change. Deborah was unbothered and proudly introduced him as her doctor to friends, often posing for photos together. Their bond grew stronger, and soon they decided to cohabitate. Deborah's daughter, Jason, who lived with her in the penthouse, was straightforward and critical of her mother's partner. She disapproved of John's unkempt appearance, finding it strange that her mother, usually dressed in designer labels like Gucci, was involved with someone in dirty robes. Jason also noticed John's peculiar fascination with the penthouse's art, statues, and paintings, as if he were assessing their value. After only 5 weeks of knowing each other, John convinced Deborah to live separately. They rented a house on Balboa Island's waterfront in Newport, costing $6,500 monthly, with Deborah paying $80,000 up front for several months' rent. For months, Deborah covered her living expenses without her children knowing, as John preferred to keep his name off the lease due to tax issues. She was so captivated by him that she took on all costs herself, unaware of her children's disapproval. John's constant acts of kindness, making her morning coffee, grocery shopping, and striving to ease her daily burdens, made Deborah believe she had found her ideal partner. She envisioned a future where her family would unite happily, hoping her children would eventually accept him. To foster a connection, Deborah arranged for her younger daughter, Tara, to meet John. Tara, who lived in Las Vegas with her boyfriend, was known for her gentle nature compared to her sister Jacqueline. Upon hearing about John over the phone, Tara decided to meet him in person. Her visit coincided with Deborah and John's move into a new home. From their first encounter, Tara felt uneasy. John's distant manner, his silent efforts to move belongings, and his tough exterior didn't sit well with her. Despite her initial reservations, she was willing to give him a chance, but soon noticed troubling signs. John didn't own a car, and although he claimed to have properties in Newport Beach and Palm Springs, he never suggested visiting them or moving closer. He mostly stayed at home, often absorbed in video games. Just before Thanksgiving, Tara decided to investigate his belongings and discovered a nurse's certificate with his name, revealing he was not a medical professional. When John learned of this, he became furious, throwing a tantrum and accusing Tara of trying to deprive his mother of happiness. He shouted that she wouldn't succeed in tearing them apart, while Deborah simply watched. Eventually, a heated argument ensued, and Tara left the house. John then used the situation to convince Deborah that her children only cared about her wealth and were waiting for her to pass away so they could take her estate. On the night before Thanksgiving, Deborah's devout mother, Arlene, arrived. John put on a religious act, but instead of earning approval, he caused another scandal. The holiday ended in chaos, prompting Deborah to seek guidance from a psychotherapist. Following professional advice, she decided to set boundaries with her children and pursue a peaceful life. She and John moved to Balboa Island, enjoying local restaurants, scenic walks, and the island's beauty. Occasionally, John displayed youthful enthusiasm, taking selfies shirtless and engaging in playful activities that lifted her spirits. Yet Deborah remained cautious. She was concerned about his attire, which consisted mainly of worn-out medical scrubs, loose trousers, and faded shirts. She wished her partner dressed more fashionably to match her lifestyle, but John claimed his nicer clothes were... This version is approximately 20% shorter, more cohesive, and polished for smooth narration, while faithfully preserving the original meaning and details. During his time in Iraq, John had stolen valuable items, prompting Deborah to accompany him on a shopping spree in early December, where he acquired a full wardrobe of high-end designer clothes. Later, when Deborah traveled to Las Vegas for work, John went along, and by that point, their relationship was less than 2 months old, yet they chose to marry. Deborah kept this decision hidden from her children. One day, an unknown woman managed to enter their home, which John used as a reason to convince Deborah of the need for increased security. He installed multiple surveillance cameras inside their house, which he monitored remotely via his smartphone, extending this surveillance to Deborah's workplace to oversee her activities. His goal was to maintain complete control over their environment. Over time, Deborah started questioning John's background and past, but each inquiry was met with quick explanations or excuses, often inconsistent. Despite these discrepancies, she believed she had found her ideal partner. Meanwhile, her children remained wary. Jacqueline took it upon herself to investigate John further, especially since he didn't own a car. She installed tracking devices on Deborah's Tesla, but this effort yielded little information. Frustrated, Jacqueline and Tara then hired a private investigator, who soon uncovered troubling facts. John had filed for bankruptcy, held a nursing license that did not permit medical practice, and had lived in various states, including Arizona, Ohio, Indiana, Tennessee, and California. One address linked to him was the Orange County Jail. When Jacqueline shared these findings with Deborah, she insisted that even if they were true, her feelings for John would not change. In late March, Deborah received a letter addressed to John from a former inmate, but she couldn't read it because John quickly snatched it away. He accused her of mistrust and claimed it was from a pen pal he was supporting emotionally. Feeling uneasy, Deborah decided to search John's belongings while he was away for work. Her investigation revealed startling truths. John was a former nurse and addict who had fallen into substance dependence, leading to his arrest and the end of his career. She also discovered evidence of his history as a manipulator and con artist. Court records showed that John had previously deceived and stolen from multiple women. Online searches uncovered a warrant for his storage unit, where authorities found a loaded handgun, bullets, a GPS tracker, syringes, and other suspicious items. It was then that Deborah realized John's true nature, an armed individual with a dangerous past, including multiple restraining orders against him. In early October, Deborah uncovered unsettling news. Her partner had been released from prison just days earlier. The shock of this revelation left her feeling vulnerable and anxious. Carefully reviewing documents, she realized the potential threat John posed to her and her children. To protect herself, she decided to maintain a facade of normalcy while waiting for the right moment to act. When John left for a hospital appointment due to back issues, Deborah seized her chance with her family's support and moved out during his absence. During the packing process, they discovered additional evidence, printouts of online comments from women warning about John's manipulative nature. These messages described him as charming yet deceitful, urging others not to be fooled by his attractiveness. Convinced of his dangerous tendencies, Deborah resolved to end their relationship and leave. Despite her decision, John continued to contact her, pleading for reconciliation. Overcome with guilt, Deborah eventually relented. By June of that year, John had convinced her to give their relationship another chance. He offered explanations for the odd items found among his belongings, admitting he had concealed his past because he believed a woman like her wouldn't have noticed otherwise. To impress her, he had even pretended to be a doctor. Now he sought her help to rebuild his life, and Deborah, still enamored, agreed. They moved into a new apartment in Irvine, though this choice caused her children considerable distress, leading the couple to keep some distance from them temporarily. By March of the following year, they had been married for over a year. Deborah dedicated herself to helping John recover from his addiction, but her family's strong disapproval remained a source of pain, especially for her daughter Jacqueline. Tensions escalated when John forbade Deborah from seeing Jacqueline after discovering she was taking real estate lessons. In a spiteful act, he contacted the school to smear Jacqueline's reputation and sent her threatening messages, even suggesting he might harm her someday. It became clear that despite apparent progress, John's malevolence was intensifying. By April, Deborah's patience had worn thin, prompting her to file for divorce. She aimed for a peaceful separation and began secretly withdrawing funds from her bank account. However, she kept $30,000 hidden in a drawer at home. When John found the money, he claimed it was his, further escalating his aggression. Recognizing the growing danger, Deborah knew she had to escape. She packed some cosmetics and work essentials and moved to Jacqueline's apartment in Irvine, seeking safety and distance from John's increasing hostility. Feeling secure amidst the numerous surveillance cameras surrounding her residence, Deborah took steps to protect herself, even attempting to secure a restraining order. However, the Orange County judge dismissed her request, citing the absence of an immediate threat, since John, who lived in another state, had not made recent direct moves against her. With limited options, Deborah focused on ending their relationship and moving forward. After their separation, John relocated to one of her properties in Nevada and repeatedly tried to contact her, but she consistently ignored his calls. The situation escalated dramatically on June 11, 2016. That day, as Deborah drove her Jaguar to work, her vehicle was stolen from the parking lot while she was at her office. The car was later recovered about 1.5 miles away, soaked in gasoline but not set ablaze, causing only minor damage. Security footage clearly identified John Mayan as responsible for the theft attempt, serving as a stark reminder of his ongoing volatility and threat level despite the physical distance. On the evening of August 20th, 2016, Tara returned home from work and parked her car in the lot. Suddenly, John appeared and attacked her with a knife, attempting to force her back into his vehicle. She screamed for help during their struggle. When John covered her mouth, she managed to bite him hard. A fierce fight ensued right there in the parking lot. Tara, wearing sturdy boots, kicked him and managed to disarm him, knocking the knife away. Seizing the opportunity, she grabbed the weapon and stabbed John 13 times, with the final wound piercing his eye. Shaken but fortunate, Tara was seen by a neighbor who came to her aid, providing a towel for her injuries. The neighbor also called the authorities. When paramedics arrived, John was still alive with a pulse. Investigators found duct tape, cable ties, kitchen knives, and a passport in his car, suggesting he might have planned to abduct Tara and leave the city with her as a hostage. John was transported to the hospital but succumbed 4 days later at the age of 57. His remains were cremated and no memorial service was held, as he was widely disliked by those who knew him. The entire incident left Deborah and her children profoundly traumatized. It took time for her to regain a sense of normalcy, though she continued to grapple with feelings of guilt over having brought a dangerous individual into their lives. As a result, Deborah became extremely cautious, carrying a stun gun and pepper spray at all times for her protection. She has stated that she would never again meet someone online, fearing similar dangers. Jamie Hahn was born on October 25, 1983, in Orangeburg, South Carolina. Growing up with her 2 brothers, Brett and Justin, and sister Ashley, she experienced her parents' divorce and subsequent remarriages, but remained a cheerful child. She attended a small yet prestigious private preparatory school known for its academic excellence. During her junior high years, Jamie visited the University of North Carolina with her classmates and instantly fell in love with the campus and its vibrant atmosphere. From a young age, she dreamed of making a difference on campus and aspired to attend a university where she could influence others' lives. Even as a student, her desire to help motivated her to join the board of the Center of Hope, supporting troubled teenagers. Later, Yang became involved in various political campaigns, with one of the most notable being Senator John Edwards' bid for the presidency in 2008, a race that pitted him against Barack Obama. During this period, she rose to prominence within North Carolina's Democratic Party. It was at a campaign event that she met Nation, forging a strong professional bond that gradually deepened into romance. Just 4 months after their initial connection, they announced their engagement and tied the knot on April 18, 2009. Their passionate love was rooted in a foundation of genuine friendship, allowing them to thrive both personally and professionally. James managed her own political fundraising consulting firm, while Nation gained recognition as an online strategist, helping politicians and nonprofit organizations run effective campaigns. Described by friends as exceptionally kind, caring, and generous, the couple was highly respected in their community. They took their marriage seriously, actively supporting initiatives like the coalition dedicated to protecting young families in North Carolina. Although they did not have children at that time, they planned to start a family soon. Both enjoyed vibrant social lives. Jane was known among friends and family as a passionate individual whose infectious enthusiasm brought joy wherever she went. Her talent and dedication to politics led many to believe she had a bright future ahead. However, their seemingly perfect world was shattered unexpectedly on April 22, 2013, around 5:20 p.m., marking a tragic turn in their lives. One day, Jamie hurriedly fled her house, running several dozen meters before collapsing unconscious in a neighbor's yard. Her body was soaked in blood, shocking everyone nearby, who immediately called emergency services. Amid the chaos, a neighbor who witnessed the scene quickly contacted authorities, overhearing Jamie's disoriented words about someone named John, who was still inside her home and had attacked her with a blade. Acting swiftly, the neighbor pressed a towel against her numerous abdominal wounds and urged paramedics and police to arrive. Soon, police officers traced the bloodstains back to the Hahn residence surrounding the house and ordering the individual inside to come out with raised hands. Moments later, a disheveled, bald man appeared on the porch, showing signs of wrist injuries and a wound in his abdomen. Due to his condition, he was transported to the hospital by ambulance, accompanied by an officer. During the ride, he became visibly distressed, tearful, expressing remorse that help hadn't arrived sooner, and repeatedly whispering a desire to end his suffering. After medical treatment, authorities worked to identify him and understand the circumstances leading to this violent event. They soon learned he was Jonathan Wayne Brill, a 31-year-old close friend of the Hahn family and a guest in their home. Jamie also knew Jonathan well. She had employed him as an accountant at her political consulting firm after he moved to North Carolina. The Hahn family had generously offered him shelter until he could find his own place. Originating from the same hometown, Nation and Jonathan first met in 2000 during a church trip. Despite a 4-year gap in their friendship, they quickly reconnected after college, becoming inseparable once again. Jonathan even served as the best man at Nation in Jamie's wedding in April of 2009. Their bond resembled that of the legendary Three Musketeers, sharing vacations, weekly dinners, and holiday celebrations. To many neighbors, Jonathan felt like an extension of the family, given how often he was at their home. This deep, seemingly unbreakable connection makes the recent violence all the more tragic and puzzling. Every Monday, Jamie and Nation hosted Jonathan for dinner. On that particular day, Jonathan arrived earlier than usual, intending to discuss campaign details with Jamie. The friends were deeply concerned about his health, as he had confided in them about a diagnosis of pancreatic cancer, a particularly aggressive and often terminal illness. True to their caring nature, the Hahns had accompanied Jonathan to his medical appointments, emphasizing the strength of their friendship and concern. Throughout his ongoing battle for survival, Jamie and Nation consistently stood by each other's side, offering unwavering support and compassion. At one point, overwhelmed by emotion, Jamie asked Nation whether they should consider having a child soon, hoping that their future offspring might someday have the chance to know Jonathan. Their deep affection for their friend was so profound that they wished even a yet-to-be-born child could share in the bond. The recent diagnosis of cancer was a devastating blow, but it was not the first health challenge Brill had faced. Over the years, Jonathan had endured multiple hospital stays, including a time when he revealed to Nation that he had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis during a gallbladder surgery. In response, the Hans family had kindly invited Jonathan to stay with them temporarily, providing care and support until his health stabilized. One fateful Monday, Jamie and Jonathan were engaged in work-related conversations in the kitchen when Nation arrived home and headed upstairs to change. Suddenly, he was startled by Jim's screams, calling out his name and Jonathan's. Assuming that Brill might have fallen or experienced a medical emergency, Nation hurried downstairs. Instead, he was met with a horrifying scene. Jim's terrified voice crying out that someone was trying to harm her. Rushing into the kitchen, Nation saw his wife on the floor, bleeding heavily, while Jonathan stood over her, wielding a large kitchen knife. Brill then advanced toward Nation, raising the weapon threateningly. Frozen in disbelief, Nation struggled to comprehend how such a nightmare could unfold in mere moments. In a desperate act of self-defense, he grabbed the knife with one hand and struck Jonathan in the face with the other. Amidst the chaos, he frantically urged Jamie to run to safety, trying to subdue a man who had been his closest friend just moments before. Despite her severe injuries, Jamie miraculously managed to rise and escape through a side door. Once outside, Nation, overwhelmed by shock and turmoil, pushed Jonathan aside and hurried after his wife. Jamie, desperately seeking help, ran to the nearest neighbor's house but found no response. Summoning her remaining strength, she tried to reach the next house but collapsed unconscious in their yard from her injuries. The commotion and her screams drew passers-by, who quickly came to her aid. One neighbor called for emergency services and police. Meanwhile, Nation, frantic and distraught, followed a trail of blood to find Jamie in a neighbor's yard. Though conscious, she was in agony, clutching her side. Kneeling beside her, Nation took her hand, offering comfort and promising recovery, future anniversaries, and seaside vacations. Tears streamed down his face as he spoke, overwhelmed by the thought of a life without her and unable to grasp how their peaceful existence had been shattered in such a tragic moment. During a tense and sudden turn of events, as they awaited assistance, a neighbor quickly handed over a towel to press against Jaime's bleeding abdomen. Sadly, the towel was soon soaked through with blood, offering little relief. Another compassionate neighbor lifted Jaime's legs onto a bundle of leaves, attempting to ease her discomfort. Though the ambulance was en route, the minutes felt agonizingly long to those watching, even though only a few had passed. Jaime's breathing became increasingly strained, a stark indication of her critical condition. When paramedics arrived, they immediately began life-saving procedures. Meanwhile, Nation had suffered deep cuts to his hand during the struggle with the weapon, urgently needing medical care himself. Both he and Jaime were rushed to the hospital. During transport, Jamie lost consciousness and was taken straight into emergency surgery upon arrival. While she was in surgery, Nation, overwhelmed with concern for his wife and unaware of his own injuries, received stitches. In shock, he repeatedly tried to access the intensive care unit, desperate for updates, but was denied. Resting anxiously on a hospital bed, Nation's mind was consumed with worry over Jaime's condition, especially given her numerous stab wounds, a severed artery, and severe liver damage. His only comfort was holding on to hope and praying for her survival. Miraculously, Jaime initially survived the operation, but this fragile hope was short-lived. 2 days after the attack, she succumbed to her injuries. An autopsy revealed she had endured 24 stab wounds across her face, neck, back, hands, and forearms. The most devastating injuries were to her abdomen and chest, causing catastrophic damage to her lungs and liver. Meanwhile, Jonathan Brill had inflicted wounds upon himself and was hospitalized for 8 days to recover from his self-inflicted injuries. On Tuesday, the 30th of April, 2013, still needing medical attention, Brill was transported on a stretcher to the magistrate's office in Wake County. He was formally charged with first-degree murder in connection with Jaime's death. Due to the gravity of the charges, he was held without bail at Central Prison in Raleigh, a facility chosen because it housed a hospital wing, ensuring continued treatment during his detention. The sudden and tragic loss of Jaime deeply affected many, leaving lingering questions about her attacker's motives. Many wondered why someone she considered a close friend would commit such a brutal act, robbing her of her future. In the aftermath, rumors circulated about a significant sum of money that had gone missing during an election campaign managed by Jaime's team. Although Jonathan Brill had officially ceased working for the organization at the end of 2012, he remained responsible for certain financial duties, raising suspicions and adding to the community's confusion and grief. Based on financial records and the process of preparing reports, it was suspected that Jameen had uncovered the missing funds, which exceeded $50,000. Confronted with this discrepancy, she questioned Jonathan, an exchange that may have triggered his violent outburst. On April 22, 2013, Jameen had invited Jonathan to their usual Monday dinner, intending to discuss the company's financial troubles. Although the exact details of what transpired during Jonathan's brief absence remain unclear, it is widely believed that Jameen challenged him about the missing money during that time. Over the following months, Jonathan's physical injuries healed, but the emotional and psychological scars persisted deeply. 6 months after the tragedy, Jameen's family and her grieving husband scattered her ashes near Pulaski Memorial Baptist Church, a place where she had dedicated much of her volunteer work. Ironically, just a week prior, the Hans family had asked the church's pastor to pray for Jonathan, who they believed was battling cancer. Little did they know that soon they would be the ones in need of community support. Faced with such an overwhelming loss, Jonathan had to accept that someone he had known since childhood, whom he regarded as his closest friend, had shattered his life and, more painfully, taken the woman he loved above all else. According to Jonathan, Jameen was his anchor, his strength, and his soulmate. He could not imagine how life could go on without her presence. The trial of Brill began on March 4th, 2015. The district attorney told the jury that Jonathan, serving as Jameen's financial manager, had written 39 checks to himself, misappropriating roughly $50,000. To justify his actions, Brill claimed various health issues, including brain impairment from multiple sclerosis, memory problems, a gallbladder surgery, and pancreatic cancer. Compassionately, Jameen had avoided confronting him about these sensitive matters during his difficult times, hoping he would recognize and correct his mistakes. Everything appeared normal until she received a call from a debt collector. The district attorney then revealed a startling truth. The previous year, Jonathan had been hospitalized after an incident at the Hans residence. Prior to that, he had not sought medical treatment, and his health records confirmed he had deceived Jameen and Nation about his health. There was no gallbladder surgery, no multiple sclerosis, and no cancer, only a severe mental disorder and something sinister within him. Further investigation uncovered that Jonathan had been searching online for information about pancreatic cancer and specialists in the field, evidence suggesting he fabricated his health issues to lend credibility to his false claims. In recent months, Jonathan had been exploring travel options that didn't require a passport, considering various cruise destinations. He had initially booked a one-way trip to Las Vegas for April 23rd, but canceled it the day before, just shy of 2 hours prior. On the evening of April 22nd, he suddenly attacked Jimmy with a knife, an act that shocked everyone involved. Later, Jonathan confessed to authorities that he had embezzled campaign funds and fabricated medical conditions to cover his tracks. During hospital visits, he was often accompanied by friends who waited nearby, offering support. Despite their care, Jonathan had been struggling with deep depression and thoughts of self-harm, haunted by voices urging him to hurt others. He had bought the knife with the intent of ending his life in Las Vegas, but he believed Jimmy might confront him about the financial misconduct. When she did, he reacted violently, beginning to harm himself in a desperate attempt to cope. Jimmy tried to intervene, but Jonathan, overwhelmed by rage and confusion, impulsively attacked her. He later recalled the assault, though parts of the incident had faded from his memory. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, both his lawyer and Jonathan understood that dismissing the charges entirely was unlikely, given the substantial evidence against him. Their strategy focused on arguing temporary insanity to potentially reduce his sentence. Before the jury deliberated, Jonathan, speaking with a voice heavy with remorse, reflected on the darkness that can lurk behind closed doors, pondering what happens when evil gains access to our lives. On March 19, 2015, the jury found Jonathan Brill guilty of first-degree murder of Jimmy Hahn and the attempted murder of Nation Hahn. The judge sentenced him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Jimmy's intentions had been pure, and her loss was so tragic that even Jonathan later admitted that, had he been honest earlier, she might have forgiven him. Her death, in his view, was a senseless act that shattered their lives and defied any rational explanation. This story took a darker turn when, on May 18, 2012, Max received an urgent call from his close friend, Jonathan Hoffman, at 5 o'clock in the evening, marking a pivotal moment in a series of tragic events. 2 students from Farmington Central High School, located in the affluent West Bloomfield area near Detroit, Michigan, had formed a close friendship that began in ninth grade during an English class, united by their shared admiration for Tupac Shakur, one of America's most influential hip-hop icons. One day, Jonathan confided in Max that he had recently failed a court-ordered drug test, a consequence of being on probation after authorities discovered a synthetic substance in his vehicle 2 months earlier. He also expressed frustration over his grandmother Sandra's intense anger toward him. At 17, Jonathan had been living with his grandparents for 9 months following his parents' divorce and their move to Arizona. Initially, he had gone with his parents, but shortly after arriving, tragedy struck when his younger sister Jessica was diagnosed with a benign brain tumor requiring multiple surgeries and ongoing medical attention. Adjusting to a new school while managing his sister's health issues left Jonathan feeling overwhelmed and unhappy. When his grandmother Sandra suggested he returned to West Bloomfield to stay with her until graduation, he was overjoyed at the prospect of reuniting with friends and familiar surroundings. However, not everyone approved of this arrangement. Jonathan's father, Michael, a well-known attorney, had noticed some concerning traits in Sandra's personality. Sandra Lane, a retired educator and mother of 5, was known for her strictness, though she loved her grandson deeply. Along with her Vosum Desiat Piat-year-old husband, Fred, she faced challenges in providing a stable environment for Jonathan, especially as he longed to reconnect with friends during what should have been his final year of high school. Eventually, Michael relented, allowing Jonathan to return to Farmington Central, where he was recognized as the class clown, a bright student, and a tech enthusiast. He had earned a full scholarship to Eastern Michigan University, and his peers viewed him as lively, cheerful, and optimistic. That's why Max was alarmed when Jonathan's call earlier that day sounded different. His voice was filled with worry and genuine fear. Later that day, the friends planned to meet, and Jonathan promised to text within 30 minutes to confirm the time. Max waited anxiously, but after 40 minutes with no message, he decided to call Jonathan directly. The phone rang repeatedly, but there was no answer. Unbeknownst to Max, Jonathan would never respond again. Just before the incident, around 5:20 p.m., the West Bloomfield Township Police Department responded to an urgent call from Sandra Lane's residence, the home of Jonathan's grandmother. The young caller, in a panicked voice, reported that he had been shot and was struggling to breathe. Over the next 3 minutes, he desperately pleaded for help, insisting he was near the point of collapse. The assailant had already fled the scene without offering aid, leaving a chilling aftermath. As the dispatcher listened, Jonathan's frantic cries for assistance were interrupted by gunfire, followed by his muffled words indicating he was dying. A brief silence ensued, then a woman's scream pierced the line, plunging the scene into an unsettling quiet. By around 5:30 in the evening, officers arrived at Sandra Lane's condo, situated within the peaceful Maple Point gated community, a neighborhood known for its low crime rate and mostly retired residents. A neighbor had reported hearing gunshots in this normally tranquil area. As police vehicles pulled onto the well-maintained lawn, they moved swiftly toward the source of the gunfire. Before they could enter, another shot rang out from inside the residence. A woman appeared at the front door, her small frame and aging red hair visible. Her clothes were stained with blood, and her hands were raised in surrender. She told the officers she had just taken her grandson's life. This revelation stunned the officers, yet what they encountered inside was even more horrifying. The condo was a scene of chaos. Bloodstains and smudges covered nearly every room, with bullet impacts marring walls and furniture. Empty shell casings littered the floor near the entrance. A discarded 9mm Glock 17 semi-automatic pistol lay nearby, and forensic analysis would later reveal additional magazines hidden within the residence. On the upper floor, officers found 17-year-old Jonathan Hoffman, face down in a pool of blood. He had sustained multiple gunshot wounds to his chest, arms, back, and stomach, indicating that numerous shots had been fired at close range. Emergency medical teams quickly transported him to Botsford Hospital, holding on to hope for his recovery. Sadly, by 6 o'clock that evening, it was clear he would not survive. Jonathan's injuries proved fatal, and Sandra was swiftly transported to the nearest medical facility as a precaution. Medical staff conducted thorough examinations to ensure her well-being. The following day, Sandra Lane faced charges for her grandson's death and was held without bail, pending trial for either first or second-degree homicide. Her guilt remained to be established by a jury, and throughout the process she insisted on her innocence. The incident cast a shadow of grief and disbelief over Jonathan's family, friends, and neighbors, who all wondered what could have led Sandra to turn a firearm against someone she loved deeply. News of the tragedy spread quickly through the peaceful neighborhood, prompting media outlets to speculate about possible motives. Rumors suggested that Jonathan had failed a drug test, and some reports pointed to a troubling pattern involving neglectful parents who left their teenage son dependent on substances in the care of elderly grandparents. According to Sandra's testimony, at the time of Jonathan's death, he had an illegal synthetic drug in his system, which had previously caused health issues. Just 2 weeks earlier, another young person under the influence of drugs had attacked their family with a baseball bat, resulting in a fatal outcome. Sandra's defense argued that her actions might have been driven by concerns for her safety, given her responsibility for a young man on probation who was difficult to control. It was known that the drug involved could provoke aggressive behavior, raising questions about whether her response could be considered self-defense. Sandra claimed that since Jonathan's return to West Bloomfield, he had become unruly and aggressive. She described him as someone who rarely left the house and associated with teenagers involved with dangerous synthetic substances. She also revealed that Jonathan's parents had not disclosed his addiction before his arrival and showed little interest in monitoring his activities during his stay. Jonathan's father, Michael, was portrayed as having abandoned him, and witnesses described Jonathan as prone to violent outbursts, smashing objects and damaging furniture when upset. During conflicts, he would often lash out, even destroying his own belongings like his computer and phone. Authorities confirmed that Jonathan had a history of drug use. In March of 2011, he was caught with hallucinogenic substances and received a deferred sentence of 93 days, along with a year of probation and mandatory drug testing. Friends and acquaintances had expressed concerns about his ongoing drug habit, highlighting a troubling pattern of substance dependence that contributed to the tragic events. Sandra dedicated significant effort to help Jonathan change his ways, focusing on improving his academic performance and encouraging compliance with her guidance. Despite her persistent attempts, he resisted, often displaying defiance, unpredictable behavior, and occasional outbursts. Fred confirmed that from the moment Jonathan arrived, tensions between him and Sandra escalated into frequent, intense disputes. She even contacted authorities multiple times due to his increasingly uncontrollable conduct, and efforts to involve the school proved unsuccessful. Sandra recounted an incident where Jonathan, under the influence of substances, lost complete control, requiring hospital staff to restrain him. She implored his parents for help, but his father remained indifferent and did not return to Michigan. Over time, Sandra grew increasingly worried for her safety, confiding in her husband about her concerns regarding their grandson and his questionable associates. Feeling increasingly vulnerable, she decided to take precautions, acquiring a Glock 17 pistol for protection in case Jonathan or his friends became aggressive. On the morning of May 18, 2012, Lane took Jonathan for a drug test, which came back positive for illegal substances. He was scheduled for a second test later that day. Upon receiving another positive result, Jonathan became furious while riding in his grandmother's car. He swore loudly, kicked the dashboard, and at one point grabbed the steering wheel, forcing Sandra to stop the vehicle. He even tried to snatch the car keys. When they returned home, the confrontation intensified. Fearing imprisonment, Jonathan decided to run away to Arizona, demanding $2,000 in the car keys, but Sandra refused. While her husband took the dog for a walk, Sandra felt overwhelmed by fear. She tried to calm her grandson but failed, retreating to her bedroom and retrieving the loaded pistol, hoping it might make him listen or at least acknowledge her presence. Returning to Jonathan's bathroom, she found him there, but instead of calming down, he insulted her, kicked her in the abdomen, and struck her on the head. A struggle ensued, during which Sandra fired the weapon. Panicked, she fled to the basement seeking refuge. After some time, she returned upstairs to check on him, only to be assaulted again as he tried to wrest the gun away. In self-defense, she fired the weapon once more. This account depicts elderly individuals caught in a tragic situation that ended with Sandra shooting her grandson out of genuine fear for her safety. However, questions arose about the accuracy of Lane's version of events. As investigations progressed, a different narrative emerged, one that was still tragic but raised serious concerns. Initial claims by Sandra about Jonathan's violent tendencies did not match the experiences of those who knew him personally. Contrary to portraying him as aggressive, interviews revealed that at school, Jonathan was known for his humor and peaceful nature. He often used his wit to diffuse conflicts, and friends reported no recent changes in his behavior. Moreover, Jonathan was described as very slender, standing at just over 1 meter 70 centimeters. Standing at nearly 67 meters tall and weighing close to 50 kilograms, Jonathan's physique hardly matched the image of someone physically formidable. His stature bore a striking resemblance to his grandmother's, emphasizing his slight build. Reports of Jonathan's so-called outbursts were almost exclusively recounted by Sandra, a claim now viewed with growing doubt. Fred Sanders, Sandra's husband, acknowledged witnessing tense exchanges between his wife and grandson, yet despite being at home most of the time, he never saw any physical altercations. Sandra played a central role in managing Jonathan's upbringing, setting strict expectations that the teenager often struggled to meet. Fred even proposed returning Jonathan to his parents in Arizona, but Sandra rejected this idea, insisting that she could handle him. Contradicting her own assertion that Jonathan was manageable under her care, she maintained control over his education and discipline. Jennifer, Sandra's daughter, told authorities that during the 9 months Jonathan stayed with his grandparents, he maintained daily contact with her and visited monthly. Throughout this period, Sandra never reported any issues or expressed feeling overwhelmed by her grandson's presence. When Jennifer learned about Jonathan's legal issues involving substances, she discussed options with her mother, considering either rehabilitation or sending him back to Arizona. Sandra convinced her daughter she could manage the situation alone, leading Jennifer to reluctantly leave her son in her parents' custody, a decision that would later have tragic consequences. Authorities responded twice to the Lane household. The first call, in March of 2012, came when Jonathan himself contacted emergency services, distressed after consuming magic mushrooms and experiencing severe paranoia, fearing for his life. Police arrived to find him unaggressive but visibly terrified. He eagerly embraced an officer before being placed on a stretcher for medical care. Just 4 days later, Sandra Lane called again, reporting that her grandson was furious and attempting to escape, claiming he was being forcibly confined in her vehicle. Officers found Jonathan vocally criticizing his grandmother, and law enforcement suggested intervention. Sandra chose to handle the situation herself, and the incident was recorded as a routine dispute, resolved peacefully. Yet, for investigators, it appeared less like typical teenage rebellion and more like a woman exerting her authority over a defiant child. On April 12th, during a hearing about possession of illegal substances in probation, Sandra's anger seemed to intensify. She believed she could discipline her grandson effectively, but as graduation approached and her efforts seemed to falter, her resolve waned. Faced with limited options, she could have contacted her daughter or sought rehabilitation for Jonathan. Instead, she acquired a semi-automatic pistol and took shooting lessons at a range, determined to assert control at any cost. Days after Jonathan was placed on probation, Sandra applied for a license to carry a firearm. On April 18th, she purchased a 9mm Glock, explaining to the store clerk that she needed it for home protection. She chose a weapon designed for lethal force, along with expanding bullets intended to cause maximum damage. She trained at a nearby shooting range until confident in her handling of the firearm, keeping her new skill hidden from her husband, who remained unaware of the gun's presence. He was surprised when he eventually discovered how much she had achieved in secret. On the evening of May 18th, 2012, Sandra and Jonathan returned home around 5 o'clock. Sandra then asked her husband Fred to take their dog for a walk, insisting he stay outside until she permitted him to return. Their outdoor time stretched so long that both the homeowner and the dog grew tired, eventually sitting together on the grass watching a basketball game. During an interview, Fred Wayne, the grandfather of the high schooler involved, recounted that when they heard police sirens, he failed to understand the situation. It seemed that Sandra's desire for Fred to leave was less about fearing for her safety and more about executing a plan without interference or witnesses. If Jonathan had been as agitated as his grandmother described, it's unlikely Fred would have left them alone. Yet, more compelling evidence against Sandra was yet to emerge. At around 5 o'clock in the evening, Jonathan was speaking with his friend Max about their plans for the evening. Max told the police that Jonathan's tone was not angry or excited, but frightened. He was worried about failing a drug test and anxious about his grandmother's reaction. Jonathan also mentioned that Sandra was so furious she threatened to send him back to Arizona. Sandra claimed her grandson had violently assaulted her, hitting her in the head and abdomen before she fired her weapon. Medical personnel from the nearest hospital examined her immediately afterward, but found no injuries or bruises. Ballistic evidence showed Sandra fired more than 10 rounds at various locations inside the house. 2 bullets hit Jonathan, with one shot aimed at his back as he tried to escape, and another striking his abdomen while he was wounded and speaking with a Deviatsol Ordinatsat dispatcher. Police concluded that Sandra was the one chasing Jonathan, not the other way around. The grandmother appeared to punish her grandson for perceived wrongdoing while he sought refuge. At some point, she went to the basement to reload her pistol, likely when Jonathan went to his bedroom to call for help, then returned to shoot him at close range. The final proof against Sandra's claim of self-defense came from the toxicology report. It showed that at the time of the shooting, Jonathan's blood contained no illegal substances, only a metabolite of a harmful drug in his urine. The forensic expert clarified that this residual trace indicated all substances had left his system and did not influence his behavior. In other words, Jonathan was fully conscious and lucid when Sandra fired at him. As a result, her self-defense argument was dismissed. On March 19th of 2013, Sandra Lane was convicted of a serious crime against her grandson, Jonathan Hoffman. Before sentencing, the elderly woman expressed remorse for her actions, pleading for understanding. She insisted that her intention had not been to take the teenager's life, but to... Sandra Lane faced a lengthy prison sentence after a tragic incident, with her daughter Jennifer vehemently demanding the harshest punishment. Jennifer insisted that her mother was utterly untrustworthy and likely to repeat her harmful actions if given the chance. She portrayed Sandra as a deeply obsessive and fixated individual, obsessed with academic success, and dismissed all claims her mother made as falsehoods. Jennifer concluded her statement by expressing her belief that her son now dwelled in a peaceful place beyond Sandra's reach, emphasizing that she would never have access to him again. Sandra was sentenced to a minimum of 20 years behind bars, with an additional mandatory 2-year term for using a weapon during the commission of manslaughter. Her defense lawyer had argued for leniency, citing concerns about her ability to endure a prolonged incarceration. Jonathan's funeral took place on May 22, 2012, attended by around 700 friends and loved ones. They remembered him as a joyful young man whose presence always brought laughter and warmth. As a grandson, he had fallen short of his grandmother's expectations, leading her to feel that he did not belong in this world. Moving on, let's consider the case of Paula Salazar. Born on September 6, 2015 in Venezuela, she was the daughter of Andrina Bermudo and Leonardo Salazar. Her mother hailed from Maune, while her father was from Tupa, a town in Delta Amacuro. When Paula was just a year old, in September of 2016, her family decided to emigrate to Ecuador, seeking better opportunities. Soon after arriving in Quito, the capital, family tensions arose, prompting Andrina to separate from Leonardo and relocate with Paula to Cuenca, Ecuador's third-largest city. During this period, Andrina's close friend's mother kindly offered them temporary shelter while they searched for new employment. Meanwhile, Leonardo, who had been disabled since a youth accident that left his left arm entirely incapacitated, decided to return to Venezuela and later moved to Trinidad and Tobago. His disability made it difficult for him to find stable work, even in Quito. After relocating to Cuenca, Andreina nearly severed all contact with Leonardo, informing him only once that she had found work on a farm in Tabacundo. A few months after their separation, Andreina entered a new relationship with Washington, a local Ecuadorian and farm owner. Washington came from a wealthy background. When Paula was about 18 months old, Andreina moved in with Washington, and together they welcomed a child, marking a period of happiness and family unity. However, this peaceful chapter was soon overshadowed by unforeseen troubles. On March 27, 2020, a tragic event unfolded that deeply affected everyone involved. At that time, the family was living peacefully on their farm, enjoying each day without concern. Everything seemed to be going well until Andreas decided to drive to the flower plantations. During the trip, their 4-year-old daughter Paula suddenly became very ill. She felt dizzy and started to vomit. With no other options, Andreas pulled over at the public restroom. Inside, Paula vomited again, prompting Andreas to leave her momentarily while he went to the car to fetch a change of clothes, as her own were soiled. When he returned, he found Paula slumped with her head in the toilet bowl. He quickly pulled her out and began administering first aid before rushing her to the hospital. Upon arrival, medical professionals found that Paula showed no signs of life. Despite their efforts, she was pronounced deceased shortly after examination. The initial assessment revealed inconsistencies in Andreas's account, notably bruises on her face and body that did not match his story. Medical protocols mandated that authorities be notified immediately, which they did. Police arrived swiftly and detained Andreas as a suspect. Although he claimed Paula had drowned in the toilet, the autopsy uncovered a disturbing reality. Tests indicated she had been dead for roughly 24 hours before arriving at the hospital, contradicting Andreas's timeline, which suggested he had performed resuscitation just 20 minutes prior. The autopsy also revealed severe injuries, multiple fractured ribs, microtraumas, a cracked spine, and signs of infection, all pointing to a violent cause of death. It became evident that her passing was not accidental. Paula's father, Leonardo Salazar, learned of her death on March 33rd, days after the incident. His mother, still in Venezuela, informed him by phone, having heard the news from a friend of Andreas. After Leonardo left Ecuador, Andreas began a new relationship and cut off all contact with him. For 3 days, Leonardo remained unaware of the tragedy, only able to see Paula's images sent by friends and Andreas's family. Meanwhile, Andreas had blocked Leonardo on all social media platforms, severing communication and turning most of their mutual friends against him by portraying him as indifferent to Paula's well-being. Despite these obstacles, Leonardo was determined to uncover the truth about his daughter's death. However, Andreas's family offered an alternative explanation, claiming Paula had died during the quarantine period imposed by the pandemic. Skeptical of this story, Leonardo began to investigate further, seeking answers to the unanswered questions surrounding Paula's tragic passing. After uncovering the extent of virus-related fatalities in the country through social media and news outlets, Leonardo quickly realized that the few victims included no children. With the help of his relatives, he continued his investigation, learning from one family member about a newspaper report detailing the arrest of Anina on suspicion of causing Paula's death. Driven by a relentless desire for answers, Leonardo called on Rena daily until she finally responded 10 days later, citing legal restrictions imposed by her attorneys. In response, Leonardo collaborated with an acquaintance to create a Facebook page dedicated to Paula's memory, alongside an Instagram profile titled Justice for Paula. The posts generated widespread outrage across social media, aiming to hold those responsible accountable. On the very day Anina finally contacted Leonardo, she arrived at the morgue to arrange her daughter's funeral. Despite the prosecutor's request for additional time to examine Paula's remains, the funeral proceeded on April 10, 2020, and Anina refused a second autopsy. Information shared on social media and by Unrena's friends revealed disturbing details about Paula's life before her passing. They provided Leonardo with various recordings, photographs, and audio clips painting a tragic picture. Witnesses reported that since Paula's mother moved in with Andreas, she endured abuse from both her stepfather and her biological mother. Not only did Unrena allow this treatment, but she was also directly involved. People observed that Paula appeared happy only when she was alone, away from her abusers. In their presence, she seemed withdrawn, shy, and often overwhelmed by fear. She confided that her mother and stepfather would punish her severely for misbehavior, even admitting that Andreas had once pushed her into a wall, causing her to hit her head. Paula described her stepfather as a monster and was clearly terrified of him. She suffered from nightmares and insomnia from a young age. When the family moved into Andreas's home, the 2-year-old girl was expected to sleep alone, often crying herself to sleep unnoticed. Her mother and stepfather forced her to fend for herself, neglecting her needs. Additionally, her mother had been teaching her to cook since she was 2, which seemed unreasonable as Paula was made to prepare her own breakfast and dinner. Her mother preferred to sleep in the mornings and avoid caregiving, showing little concern for her daughter's safety, even allowing her to handle dangerous household appliances. A girl frequently complained of persistent pain in her legs and back, often expressing her inability to walk. Her constant grievances, coupled with visible bruises on her body, prompted her teacher to seek medical attention at a health center. After a thorough examination, medical professionals concluded that the girl, Paula, was likely experiencing mistreatment at home. Concerned, the teachers contacted a specialized police unit to investigate the case of suspected abuse within Paula's family. Authorities took immediate action, deciding to place Paula in a safe environment while the investigation proceeded. On October 16th of 2019, Paula was temporarily placed in her uncle Andrena's care, her mother's brother. A court hearing was scheduled for December 4th of that year to address the situation. Unfortunately, the teachers who were expected to testify failed to appear for reasons that remain unclear. As a result, the court postponed the case, setting a new hearing for February 27th of 2020. Yet, once again, all the teachers failed to attend, leaving the court with no choice but to dismiss the charges against Paula's parents and return her to her mother's custody. Tragically, just 1 month later, on March 27th, Paula passed away. The exact reasons why the teachers chose not to participate in either hearing remain unknown, though speculation suggests that Andrena might have bribed or persuaded them that Paula's issues were not caused by her family's actions. Following Paula's death, Andrena was placed in protective custody during the ongoing investigation. He later appealed this decision, leading to a hearing on June 12th of 2020. During the virtual court session, the judge granted a protective order and allowed Andrena to be released under house arrest. However, at that hearing, Andrena announced his intention to withdraw his appeal. Meanwhile, Leonardo, Paula's father, was actively campaigning on social media, seeking financial support to travel from Trinidad and Tobago to Ecuador. His goal was to file a formal complaint against Paula's mother before it was too late, as she had not yet been charged and remained free. Fortunately, Leonardo secured enough funds and received free legal assistance from 2 Ecuadorian lawyers, Oswaldo and Alejandro, who generously offered their support for the legal process. The journey to Ecuador was perilous. Leonardo had to cross the border between Trinidad and Venezuela by rafting across dangerous waters, then traverse rugged terrain due to the closure of all maritime and land borders in Venezuela caused by the pandemic. Limited flights were available, making travel challenging. Upon reaching Colombia, he crossed into Ecuador through hazardous terrain, then traveled by bus through hills and plains until he arrived at the border crossing at Racaca. After crossing into Ecuador, Leonardo took a taxi to Quito, where he immediately met with a lawyer. On June 30th of 2020, the grieving father filed a formal complaint against Paula's mother, aiming to establish her as a suspect in Paula's death. By July 6th of that year, an indictment was underway, marking a crucial step in the pursuit of justice. In November, DV Tisiachi Devadsat, legal proceedings were initiated against Andrena, who appeared in court where it was decided that house arrest would replace full custody. The initial hearing took place that month, although a specific trial date had not yet been set. During these discussions, authorities expressed concern about Andrena's potential to escape, especially given her prior attempt to harm herself with pills. As a precaution, her lawyer requested the installation of an electronic monitoring device, a request the judge approved. Additionally, her court appearances were reduced from twice a week to once, but soon after, Andrena asked for a reconsideration of the electronic bracelet requirement. This led to another hearing on November 16th, which caused some delays in the trial schedule. Ultimately, a new date was set for December, but media coverage remained limited. Despite the sparse reporting, much information circulated on social media, though the ongoing pandemic kept most news focused elsewhere. The trial officially commenced on January 14th, 2021. At that stage, no final decision had been made regarding alternative detention options for Andrena. While she remained held at the Regional Detention Center, the proceedings were conducted privately, with no media present. Some participants attended via video link to ensure the process moved forward smoothly despite restrictions. In the course of the investigation, a medical examiner provided crucial insights into Paula's autopsy. The findings revealed severe and disturbing injuries. Nearly all her spinal discs had been reconstructed. She had broken ribs. Some healed naturally, and exhibited signs of nail stigma, where nails grow into the skin. Her face and body bore bruises and scratches, and fluid accumulation was found in her lungs. Serious internal injuries, including scars on her head and lacerations on her colon, indicated prolonged physical trauma before her death. These injuries were instrumental in understanding her final days, as they pointed to sustained abuse. The injuries eventually led to infection and sepsis, which caused her death. The autopsy confirmed that Paula had been deceased for roughly 24 hours before she was taken to hospital. The extent of her injuries underscored the cruelty she endured and highlighted the neglect by her guardians, who never sought medical help. Paula was also underweight and malnourished, with clear deficiencies in minerals and nutrients, indicating neglect. Her mother, Andrena, tried to justify Paula's injuries by claiming she had psychological issues that led to self-harm behaviors, suggesting these were attempts to attract attention. According to Andrena, her younger son was also involved in the ongoing narrative, though details remain limited. Born in October DVE Tiziachi Deviatnatsat, Paula quickly showed signs of distress, losing interest in sleep, and attempting to manipulate those around her through crying. Despite a court order requiring her to stay with her uncle, she predominantly remained at her parents' home, only occasionally visiting her uncle's house. This suggested that the measures implemented by authorities failed to produce the desired effect. Furthermore, it was revealed that shortly after Leonardo's departure from Ecuador in DV Tisiachi Semnatsat, Paula began experiencing abuse, likely starting soon after her mother, Andrena, entered into a relationship with Andreas. During a trial attended by over 40 witnesses, it was confirmed that Paula endured mistreatment for at least 3 years of her brief life. In the final hearing before the verdict, Andrena took full responsibility, admitting to physically punishing Paula with a belt and sometimes hitting her with her fists. She attempted to shift blame away from her partner, Andreas, asserting that he was innocent and had no involvement in the abuse. Andrena also explained that she had scolded her daughter for causing trouble with her new husband. She claimed that breaking up with him would mean returning to the streets and losing the financial stability she relied on, indicating that caring for Paula was not her primary concern. The judges, after reviewing Paula's case, expressed concern for her newborn brother, noting that unlike Paula, he had never been subjected to abuse. It is also noteworthy that Andreas chose to remain silent and has not commented publicly since his arrest on February 3, 2021. Both defendants were ultimately convicted of the girl's murder, with the maximum penalty being 13 years. Prosecutors and Leonardo's original attorneys sought the harshest punishment, but given that Paula was only 4 years old and unable to defend herself, the presiding judge sentenced Andrina and Andreas to 17 years and 4 months in prison. Under Ecuadorian law, convicted individuals have 3 days to appeal, and both immediately indicated their intention to do so. Despite the sentence, Andreas remained under house arrest rather than detention, using his right to appeal, which requires higher court approval of his incarceration. He continues to comply with the previously imposed restrictions. This case starkly contrasts with Andreas's situation, as he was detained upon arriving at the hospital after the girl's death. Public outrage grew over Andrina's continued freedom, with many, including Leonardo, expressing concern that she might evade justice altogether. It appears that the provided text is incomplete or contains only the phrase or 4-4, which does not offer enough context or content to perform a meaningful rewrite or expansion. Please provide the full original text you'd like me to work with, and I will gladly create a polished, concise, and engaging version according to your instructions.